Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this tutorial video, we're going to sew up a long-lasting RV cover. Sure, you can get a cheap RV cover that lasts a year, maybe two, but they seldom fit well and must be tensioned with straps because they are typically way oversized to fit a number of rigs. We will make this RV cover to an exacting fit. Not too tight, but not too loose, which causes damage to the fabric if it's left to flap around in the wind. We will use a fabric from Sailrite that will last for many seasons, possibly up to 15 years. The project is rather easy, but it does take a lot of time. For most, it may take up to 5 days of solid work. But it's well worth the effort to get a great fitting cover that is not made of cheap junk fabric. This tutorial video is part of our RV restoration project series. You'll find almost 40 tutorial videos showing how you can update your RV with fabric. Check out the playlist link in the description below.
To calculate for fabric usage, we really only need 5 measurements on the RV. So I have a line that comes down here, and this is going to be a line that we use often, and it's also at the front of the RV. If you don't have that, you may want to put some masking tape down so you can use that as a reference. So I'm going to measure from this line to the line up front, and I do need 2 people for this. With the tape measure held fairly firmly, I get to this point 318 inches. That's our first measurement. Then I'm going to measure from the roof line, but not all the way up to the top of the roof line, but right where I want the roof panel to intersect with the side panel, and that's right about at this location. So I'm going to measure from that location down, and I want the fabric to come down below this lip so it wraps around a little bit. So 84 inches for me, which is right there, should be plenty. And I will have some extra fabric in that. So 84 inches is my second measurement. I'll write that down. My third measurement will be from this point on our RV, and I'll come around to a little bit past the corner, and I get 20 inches. And that should be the same for all corners. This is the widest part of the RV here at this bumper. Up here it's a little bit skinnier. So 20 inches is what I get here. I'll write that measurement down. That's our third. Our fourth measurement will be from that ridge line up here that basically goes down to the side to that first measurement of 318 inches. And I'm going to use a soft tape measure and measure in the middle because that's the widest part. So here I get 25 inches, and I'll just carry this down to the bottom. If I follow the tape measure down, I'm just going to hold it so that I can actually use it down here at the bottom. That's 91 inches. And what I get down here is about 99 inches, and that should be about the same in the front. You may want to measure to confirm that it's about the same, but we want about 4 extra inches of fabric to be our finished size, so 99 inches. For my final measurement, I have a person on the other side that's going to hold it at this ridge line here, and we're going to measure across. So you got it on that line. So what I get here, is 88 inches. So from here on this side to that side over there. Now we do have an awning here, and you may want to take a measurement including that awning just to make sure you have enough fabric. But technically we're going to be adding to the length of the fabric, so this awning which protrudes out should not be any problem for us.
These are the calculations to figure how much fabric is required for the side panels and top panel. You can actually enter these equations into a Google search and it will calculate it out instantly for you. Please note, you will need extra fabric for zipper flanges which protect the zippers from the elements. They are cut to 5 inches wide. Also, extra fabric will be required for the wedge strip, which accommodates the height of the equipment on the roof, like the air conditioner. In most cases, that extra fabric can be taken from the leftovers, but in some cases, you may need more. In blue, we will show the calculations for our RV cover. We ordered 69 yards of fabric, and it was plenty, no need for more. To pick your fabric, go to the Sailrite website and click on Shop, Fabric, Auto and RV Fabric, then covers. To narrow it down slightly more, go to Narrow By, hit RV and Auto Uses, and click RV Covers. Here you'll find the recommended fabrics for RV covers. Once you make your selection, read about the specifications of each fabric because each one of these brands are different. We're going to click on Top Notch 9. Scrolling down, you can read the description. Scroll down a little further and you can read the specifications. This fabric has an 8-year warranty, but since RV covers are typically only used in the winters, you can expect it to last much longer. Up next, we're going to pattern for the corners of the RV using Durascrim pattern material.
So for patterning, what we plan to do is we plan to make a panel that comes all the way across here with zippers across the top so that they can separate, and then a zipper coming straight down. So we need to decide approximately where that zipper is going to go because we're going to make this panel removable from the top. The top's going to go all the way across the top, and then it's going to come down to the bottom here. So I don't need to pattern the whole thing, but I definitely want this cover to fit well compared to the stuff you get at a box store or online that doesn't fit hardly at all. That's why they have so many straps everywhere. So I'm going to just pattern. This is a great spot here because there's already a line in the RV here. I'm going to pattern from here, and I'm going to decide where the top cover is going to come down this corner. And I believe that I'd want it to stop right about here. So I'm going to put strapping tape up here. Because we're going to put a zipper in here, we have to have the zipper come above the door. So the zipper will probably be installed right about here probably. Which means that the top fabric will have a seam because the zipper is going to be installed in the side panel. And then there's going to be excess fabric up here, and we're going to have this top panel come down to, we could have it come to here, but I actually think I'm going to come to here so that water will just run off here instead of having a seam all the way up here. So I'm probably going to use this as my reference for the top, where that fabric will come. So let's pattern this corner. So what I do is I use strapping tape first, and then I put double-sided tape on top of it. And since this is going to be where we want that top panel to be seamed to this side panel, I'm going to put the strapping tape there. And then I'm going to run it over to this corner here because I'm going to come down here and put it on here. And then I'm going to come down. Let's see, I just want to do it so it's got a pleasing, there, right there. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make a turn right here at this edge here. And we're going to have the seam fall on this corner. It doesn't really matter where it goes. We just want it to be fairly pleasing. And I want it to come right about here. So I'm actually going to run the tape all the way to that corner. And I think I'll do it a little bit over here, like that. Now let's see what that looks like. I'm going to cut this. See, this looks like it's coming in like this, and I don't want that, so I'm going to move it over here a little bit so it's a little bit more of a natural. There we go, like that, coming down to there. Perfect. Now the only reason I'm going to put strapping tape here down this side is that we'll take measurements for the rest of this side panel. So I'm going to strap it to the top here and come down this edge here. So I can put double-sided tape on this. And again, this is not going to be a seam. This is just to get that pattern for that shape here. Because there's, as you can see, it's not a square. It's got a lot of shape here. So we're going to go all the way to the bottom and cut our strapping tape. Next, we're going to apply a seam stick for canvas right on top of the strapping tape so that we can apply our Durascrim pattern material to this corner. And we're going to do that on top of all of the strapping tape. If you put it directly on the RV chances are it'll be difficult to remove the double-sided tape. Thus, the strapping tape. It makes it a little bit easier to remove the double-sided tape from the RV. We're going to take the transfer paper off of the double-sided tape, revealing the glue, and up here as well. We have a piece of Durascrim that is cut to the approximate size of this corner, and I'm just going to start it here at the top and stick it down. We can make adjustments if necessary. I just want to get it up here while I'm on the ladder. And if you leave it large and there's some wind, it's just a real nightmare. That's why we cut it down. And it's best to do this on a non-windy day. So I just want to get it in the general spot and remove the strapping or the transfer paper. Now I know I'm kind of patterning here. We'll probably have to move it a little bit, but I guess I could start at the bottom like I have. And we're going to get it fairly taut and work out all of the wrinkles. Like here's a bubble here. I'll work to the top this time.
After the pattern's on, cut it down so that it doesn't blow around much in the wind. So cut it very close to where you basted it.
There's definitely shape up here. So I'm going to put the Durascrim pattern material on, and I'm going to put a pleat right here to get rid of that shape. So I just fold the material in to that location, and there's my pleat right here. And so what you want to do with a pleat is you just want to mark where the pleat ends, which is right here. And then flip it over and put a mark on the opposite side. So now we know how much material needs to be taken out there to get it to take this shape. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you know this is a cover and we don't want it to be so tight that it doesn't fit, but yet since we're going to have removable panels, it'll be pretty easy to get it on, since the side panels are going to be removable. Here's another small pleat, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it because it takes a turn here. Right to there. That takes out that little bit of fabric for a super tight fit. So this is remember we had a little edge here, and all I'm going to do with my marker here is mark on that edge, so it makes it pretty easy to keep this nice and straight. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom because we're going to be measuring from this point. I'm going to follow that down, follow it down. Now I'm getting a little sloppy, but it's going to be good. We can straighten it once we get to the table. We'll go all the way up here to the top, and we'll mark up there too. This is where this strapping tape is, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mark on the outside of the strapping tape here. We're using that as our guide, and technically if you can't keep it straight, just do dashes, because you're just going to take this and make a straight line on the work table or workbench. So we're going to do dashes on the one side of the strapping tape, doesn't really matter which. This will be where we seam the top panel to the side panel. This is not where the zipper will be. So I'm just marking the top of the strapping tape just like we did on the sides here at the top. And then here we want to come up all the way to the top so we know where that will intersect. There. Now I'm going to label this out, and this is the left side of the front. Left, front, corner. My cameraman corrected me. This is the right if I am looking at the RV here or here. This is the appropriate way to look at the RV. This is my right, that's my left, so this is the right corner. We're going to label BACK at here just so we don't get confused. So we know that that's the front. We're going to take the pattern material off, and we really do want to take the strapping tape off as well, but we need to mark where the strapping tape falls here so we know how to pattern for the top panel, and we'll show you how to do that next. Okay, I don't want to leave strapping tape on an RV, especially if it gets hot, because it could actually bond really well and take off the surface. So I'm going to use a grease pencil, and I'm going to mark alongside the tape where we had our black line so that we know in the future where we need to pattern for the top panel. So I'm gonna do this all along and just put dash marks down. Now I'm not gonna do it here. I'm gonna do it down here on this part so I know basically where it comes from the top here where I marked it. And this grease pencil mark will come off later pretty easily. Should always test everything. Now, once I have this marked on this side all the way at the top too, because I want to do there, I don't need to do here because I have this ridge here. So that's my reference point for where to take a measurement. Again, this is not a seam. So I have it marked all along here with my grease pencil, and this is where it's gonna, I don't need to mark any further than there, but I do need to remember where this line is. And so technically, I'm just gonna put a line right here on my awning here, because I need to put that at the same location on the other side. So now we can remove our strapping tape. That's for future reference right there from the RV. And you want to do this carefully, and you may want to test putting strapping tape on and taking it off to make sure it doesn't peel any of your painted or your whatever surface you have on your RV. But get it off as soon as possible. So you can see that we have our strapping tape already applied here to the back corner. We're doing the same process we did at the front. So it's going to come around here like this. This is where we're going to measure from, and this will be our seam coming down at a nice, pleasing position. And you can see if you look over there towards the awning, I put the strapping tape on in the same plane as it was on the front corner. So we'll mark it with our grease pencil down the outside of this tape just like we did before, and we're going to put our pattern material on. So as you can see, again, there's a very small pleat. I know this is very small and you probably don't have to worry about it, but I just want you to know how to do it. So because there's a shape transition, I smoothed all the pattern material out and made it all come to one point. So we just mark on the top of that pleat to where it stops there, and then you fold it up and you mark on the bottom of that pleat to where it stops. So that is excess material that'll come out that'll help it to take that shape. This is out, and this is the right side back, and this is the front, and we marked all around it just like we did with the other one. Don't forget to mark on the outside with your grease pencil so you know where to take the top panel, and then peel off the tape again. If your RV doesn't have a ridge like ours, which it probably won't, then you'll have to mark where that was placed as well with a grease pencil. So these are the beginnings of our RV. I've roughly drawn the RV out. 20 inches, 318, 20 inches, add that together, that's 358. We want a finished size of 84 inches from where we're on the awning all the way to the wraparound here. Now we still have to add for seam allowance and hems and extra sizes, but that is the front panel, and that should be the other side's panel size as well. And hopefully we can use the patterns we made here and flip them wrong side out for this corner, and take this one and flip it wrong side out for that corner. You might want to confirm that first, but in our situation we have, and it will work.
Now that the corners are patterned, we can do some more detailed measuring of the RV so we can make it.
So I've taped my tape measure here at this widest part at the top here, and this is where the pattern stopped. I still have my yellow marks here, and I'm going to go to the other side and measure across at 3 points: here, the middle, and below. coming across to where I have the yellow marks on this side from where I patterned, I get 84 inches. And it basically, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to pattern a shape into the front so that there's not excess fabric. So that's our first measurement. We're going to write that down. So I've taped it over there, and to the yellow mark where we patterned, I get 86 inches. I'm going to write that down. So I have it at my yellow marks right here, the tape measure. And if I measure to here, I get 25 inches. And then if I measure from here, from that location over here to this side, I get 34 inches. And then this side should be the same. Yep, 25 inches. So I'm going to write those three calculations together, which is 85 inches at the bottom. So now that we've got these three measurements here, here, and down there, we're going to do the exact same thing at the rear of the RV and write those measurements down so that we have a front that fits fairly well. These measurements don't have to be precise, they just have to be close.
We're going to take some measurements of the equipment on the roof that has extra height. Eventually, a fabric wedge will be added to accommodate for that.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure each obstacle on the roof. And I'm not going to get every single obstacle, I'm just going to get some basic ones so we can make a triangular wedge along the side to accommodate for that extra height. So I'm going to measure from that 316 ridge line here, and I'm going to measure to this one. I get 48 inches right here to the back of it. Then I'm going to measure from the roof line here up and view up to see how high it is, and it looks like it's about 6 inches. I'm going to write that down. Now I'm going to move to the antenna. Okay, from the last point that I measured from, which is right about here, I get 47 inches. And then I measure from the roof line up to the antenna, and I get about 10 inches. I'm going to write that measurement down right here. Now we're going to go to the air conditioner. From the back of the antenna, right there, to the middle of the air conditioner is 79 inches, right about here. So I'm going to measure the height of that from the roof line, and it's about 16 inches. So I'm going to write that down. And then the last one I'm going to do is that one up here. Then from the last point we measured, which is the middle of the air conditioner, I get about 72 inches. And then the height of that one looks like about 6 or 7 inches. So we'll write all those measurements down, and that'll determine the wedge that we want. But the wedge will not be those full measurements as far as the height. They're going to be half those measurements. So we'll half every height measurement because we don't need that much fabric up there.
Write down those measurements. Here are ours. We'll divide those measurements in half. 3.5, 8 inches, 5 inches, and 3 inches. We'll be making a wedge later on in this video to accommodate for the height of all that equipment on the roof. We're going to create the top fabric panel first. The top panel will be a continuous piece of fabric that extends from the rear all the way to the front. To obtain the desired width, we'll have to sew two panels together with a seam down the center. We'll take D, 99 inches for us, A, 318, and D again on the front side, 99 inches, add our 2% factor of 1.02, and add 8 extra inches just for a safety factor, and that's 532. Then we'll add 4 extra inches to that length measurement. So our desired minimum finished size is 536 length by 88 inches wide. Our fabric is 60 inches wide, so what we'll do is we'll cut two 60-inch widths of fabric to a minimum of 536 and then sew those together.
I have a large bolt of fabric from Sailrite, and an easy way to measure it is to actually just use a small table like this. My tape measure here to the end, and then I ran it all the way to 60 inches and put a piece of tape on the table, leaving a small space for the bolt to rest. And this makes it really easy to mark the length of a piece of fabric. So I'm working on the fabric for the roof. And the roof in my calculations needs to be about 550 inches when that goes over the front, the top, and the back. This edge is not cut perfectly straight, but that doesn't matter because I need to have excess fabric in this anyway. So I'm going to line it up to the edge of the table. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to mark with my marking pencil, and I'll mark it at 60 inches. Then what I do is I just roll the fabric, let the fabric hang on the floor to where it's close to the corner, and unroll this. Here my rolls is going to sit right here. I'm going to unroll it to here, and then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to line this up perfectly to the edge of the table here, like that. And then I'm going to mark here again, and this would be 120. So now we just roll this to the other end of the table, and this is the way you would deal with a large roll of fabric and measure off of a table. Now, for the sides of the RV cover, we're going to do the same process to measure out the length of fabric required, and we're obviously doing it now for the front, top, and the back. You need to make sure that you have excess fabric because when you sew a seam, it will shrink up a little bit, almost 2%. So whatever is your desired finished size, make sure you have at least 2% more fabric. For 360 inches or so, let's say we needed a 360-inch panel, we could expect about 6 or 7 inches of shrinkage after sewing. So this was 540 inches, and I ordered 31 yards of fabric for the top and the front and the back. This is the halfway point of that. So that means that I'm going to cut it at this juncture. So I'm going to use my T-square to make sure that I have a line that's straight. Not that it matters because it's going to probably be cut down. But we're going to strike a line on this and we'll cut it with a hot knife. Okay, we're going to put the tempered cutting glass underneath here. And then we can use the hot knife. This is the Sailrite Edge hot knife, and this one is cordless. So it heats up in a few seconds, as you can see. And this will keep the fabric from unraveling. We also have an Edge hot knife that is corded that's a little bit less money. And I'm going to roll this one out, and this is going to be a semi-flat filled seam. So I'm going to put the 3/8 inch basting tape right along the edge of one of these rolls so that I can baste them so outside surfaces are facing each other, though this Top Notch 9 fabric does not have a right side or a wrong side. So I'm going to baste till I reach this roll. I'm not going to break my basting tape, I'm just going to put it on top here, and then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to position it on top of this. First I'm going to peel off the transfer paper. And this way we can baste it a little at a time all at once. So peel off the transfer paper to almost the roll. So we're going to unroll this one so that it's manageable down to where we stopped. And now what I can do is I can move this panel and line it up and then just start basting. And we want this to be even across this edge. So take your time and make sure that you baste it so that it's flush. Now that it's basted to that point, I can just move the entire assembly and drop the part that's basted on the floor. Now, a good idea is to staple about every 3 foot or so, very close to that edge, because this is going to be a very large panel. So I'm going to put a staple about 1/4 inch from the edge, about every 2 to 3 feet apart. So let's unroll, let's bring this all the way over here, and then we'll roll this one out. And we'll put basting tape onto that point and do that same procedure yet again.
We basted those 2 panels together. It's now time to sew.
Okay, I first have some scrap in here, and I have got it set to straight stitch 6 millimeters, and I'm using V92 thread and a size 20 needle. What I want to do is check my tension. Especially with my first stitch, I don't want it to be too tight because it causes excessive puckering. So I'm going to look at the underside, and it's probably very difficult to see, but my knot is not on the underside. And I want my knot to be a little bit on the underside, so I'm going to release some upper tension here, and I'm going to sew again and see if this improves it within this 2 layers of scrap. Let's see what we've got. Okay, I don't see a knot on top, which is good, and there's still no knot on the bottom. I want the knot to be a little bit on the bottom side. So I'm going to release some more tension. There we go. I can feel it. I can't really see it, but I can feel it with my fingernails. I feel I'm hitting the knot. So that's the minimal tension that I can do, which will help to reduce puckering. And that's going to be my first stitch in this semi-flat felled seam. We're going to put the deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide on the 1/2 inch mark of the needle plate. We're going to put the needle in center position. And we're going to sew a 1/2 inch from the raw edge of the fabric that we just basted together to create our semi-flat felled seam. This is the first stitch. No reason to do any reversing at the beginning. We don't know exactly where the beginning and the end are. We have extra length in our fabric in case of shrinkage. I'm going to bury my needle and get my fabric in the right position again. And so. We're going to do this all the way down the length. Don't forget to remove all the staples. We've already removed all of them but that one. Now we're ready for the top stitch. To do that, I'm going to remove the magnetic guide because we don't need that. And then we're going to splay this fabric open. I'm not going to roll it. I'm actually just going to push it through the throat of the sewing machine. Now this seam goes in the center of our top, so it doesn't really matter which way the seam allowance goes because there's water's not going to really be running off of it. It's in the center. So I'm going to put it off to the left. There. So I'm going to sew through it. I'm going to put the foot down. I'll push this fabric through to get it started. And then I'm just going to pull left and right. And we're not going to do any reversing because we don't know where the beginning is again. Now when you're doing this, bury your needle when you stop and position things so you don't lose your spot. And you can feel the seam allowance. I can feel it right here. So it's right where I need to be. Once you get going, it's not going to be as hard. At the beginning, it's a little bit more difficult. The needle's buried. I'm going to push this through. Once this starts going through, it's going to go through a lot easier. Splay my fabric apart left and right. Bury my needle. It's a good idea to check to make sure that you're sewing in your seam allowance, and we are. Okay, we're just going to keep doing this down the entire length. This one takes a little bit longer because you have all this bulk going through here, but as you can see, it's possible. When we were out in the RV, we measured from this junction here down to this strip here, and that's 19.5 inches. From the strip to this point, and that's 44 inches, and then from that point down here, which is 36 inches, and then we'll add some extra because we don't know exactly where this is going to fall. And the same thing on this side. From that strip up here, 17 inches, 44 inches, and 38 inches. And then we also measured for where our pattern stops at 83 wide, 86 wide, and 99 wide, which includes the bumper. Okay. So I drew this all out on paper. So at 36, 44, and 19.5, I drew out my width, and I added 1 inch for seam allowance. So my width here is 89, 81, 87, and 85, and that's 36 inches, 44 inches, and 19.5 inches. Then here on the ceiling, this is 89 inches all the way to this other strip. This is the 318 inches, but when we measured the strip up here that takes the shape for these obstacles, when we measured that, it was 320. So I added the 320 here. So
at 38, 44, 17, 320, 19, 44, 36, that's 518.5 inches. This is the front. I've marked it front, and this is the back. So we're going to start at the front here, and I'm going to measure 36 inches, 44, 19 and a half, 320, 17, 44, and 38. And we're going to mark it on the seam here in the middle, because I want the seam to be the middle. But I'm also going to mark front so I don't get confused. The paper says nothing about adding extra, but I want to add 9 inches. I have plenty of fabric, so I'm going to start my front basically there. This should give me plenty of material to come around. So my first measurement, 36 inches. And I am working with the back side up. It doesn't really matter. You can mark on the front or the back. So 36 inches is here, and I'm just going to mark 36, so I know that. We also should mark, I'm going to mark on the underside the width, 84 plus 1 inch for seam allowance here, and here is 85. And then at my 36, I need 87. So I'm going to mark 87 here. That way I don't have to keep looking back at this paper. Now I need to move my fabric and continue marking. My next measurement is 44 inches according to my paper. So I'm going to measure from the last point, 44 inches. And I'll just write 44 here on the top. And the 44 is supposed to be 81. Move it down to the next one, which is 19 and a half inches down from this. I can measure here, 19 and a half. Right there. And this one is supposed to be 89. Okay, the next measurement is actually 320. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 19 and a half on the edge of the table, and my table's 72 inches. So I can just mark it until I reach the 320 inches. So right there is the edge of my table, and I can mark over here 72, and I'll just keep doing this until I reach my 320. So our last measurement at 38 was 100 inches. This includes for the bumper, and it's excellent because I have all this excess fabric, more than 9 inches. So I am in good shape here. I'm not going to mark it at 9 inches because I've just got this as excess. Now what we want to do is, this one's 100. So what I want to do is measure off to the left side a half of that, which is 50 inches. So I have it lined up here, and I'm just going to measure over a perpendicular approximately to that, and that's 50 inches here. We're just going to mark one side first, and then we'll mark the other side after we're done marking it. This one says 87, so I'm going to put this on the seam allowance in the same spot for every measurement and do half of that. That's 43 and a half, and I'm going to mark it fairly heavily there. I'm probably going to just strike lines too while I'm doing this, which is a good way to get this done without having to move the fabric all over the place. So let's go ahead and find that 100 or 50 inch line and strike a line to there. And I'm also going to take it off of the end of the fabric. We have extra fabric, but I'm just going to continue that line past that. So from line to line, I don't want to go past the line here. I'm going to mark it here, but I don't care about going past here, like that, okay? So now let's move it to the next measurement. And I'm going to strike a line there, like that. We'll continue on down the length. Now that we have this side marked, I'm going to move the seam to the other side of the table, and we'll repeat that same process here. Now we're going to cut it out. We have the tempered cutting glass on the bottom side, and I'm using the Sailrite edge hot knife. This seals the edges. We're going to do this on both sides. This is my basically 318 inch location. It says 320 because the top panel has a little bit extra fabric. I'm going to use a T-square and place it over the seam allowance at that juncture, and then I'm going to transfer that to the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to notch it here. So at that location, on the back side and the front side, we want to know where the adjacent panel should line up. And this notch that I cut with scissors should give me that indication. So I need to do that here, I need to do that on the other side, and I need to do it on the front side.
We're going to protect the zippers from the elements by making a zipper flap, or sometimes referred to as flanges. Here's a look ahead at the zipper flanges. These are flaps of fabric that protect the zippers from the sun and also keep water shedding away from the zipper's opening.
And all the rainwater will go this direction. We're going to make zipper flanges, which will protect the zipper in the weather. So I'm going to cut these 5 inches wide, and this is one of my top panels which has extra fabric on the sides. So I'm going to use the excess fabric from the top and the front and the back panel, and I'm going to go all the way down its length for this, because we don't need all this extra fabric. We're going to sew 2 pieces together with the seam in the middle. So what I like to do is I like to put my mark on the fabric. I have my tempered cutting glass on the bottom, and then I'll just start cutting it with a hot knife. Now, I don't recommend that you use scissors on this. You don't want unraveling on this, even on the inside. I definitely recommend that you use a hot knife that seals the edges and keeps them from unraveling. So I'll cut up to the edge of the tempered cutting glass, and then I put my hot knife on another table. I slit the fabric and I let it go off to the side, which helps to pull my fabric for the next cut. Then I'm going to move the fabric to the edge of the tempered cutting glass, leave this hanging off the edge, which helps to separate it when I'm cutting it, and make my next slice. And we're going to do this all the way down the length of this 580 some inch panel for our zipper flaps. So this is our 5 inch wide strip, and I'm going to put the seam stick basting tape for canvas along one edge going all the way down its length, and then we'll fold this directly in half, and this will make a great flange for the zipper to protect the zipper from the elements and to have the rainwater basically drip down away from the zipper opening. We're going to peel back the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and then what we're going to do is we're going to fold this right in half along that edge. Now we are going to come back and we're actually going to fold this under, but we can do that after we're done with this. So fold it all the way down its length, and we're going to be putting a stitch right here next to the fold. So we've basted all of it, but we're going to open up this end, and I usually open up about 5 inches or so, and I'm just going to put double-sided tape across here. And notice that I break the double-sided tape. I don't usually cut it, because then I can grab the backing and peel it off easily. So I'm going to fold this back about a 1/2 inch or so. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then refold this. So this will be a finished end. We didn't do that with the other side at all, the other end. We left it open because we're going to have to cut them to a specific size. Okay, so after it's basted together, what I like to do is use the edge of a sharp table and crease it well, because we're going to be sewing it here. So all I do is this, and that helps to crease this nicely. We're going to sew across here and then sew all the way down it on that, along that fold. So this will give us a finished edge. And we're going to sew a straight stitch and about a 6mm straight stitch. When I reach the corner, I'm going to bury my needle at the corner where I want it to pivot around. And then I'm going to lift my foot, and I'm going to sew down this side, and I'm going to put my magnetic guide right here so I can sew as fast as I want.
After this is sewn, we're going to set this aside and save it for a future step. We'll be cutting links out of this for each one of the zipper locations. Now we're going to show how to cut and sew the side fabric panels together. Now we'll be sewing together the side panels. They are removable with zippers going up vertically and 2 zippers going horizontally, also with a door access, which we'll cover later on.
So I have 318 from here to here. I have 20 inches here, 20 inches here. That's 358. Then I'm going to have the shrinkage factor, and the shrinkage factor can be up to 2%. So what I've done is I'll take 358, 59, 60, so 360 times 0.02. I could get shrinkage up to about 7 inches. So I put in an extra 8 inches. So I'm going to cut the length of my panels to 368. I'm going to do 2 of them. We're going to have a 60-inch panel here and a 30-inch panel here, which should give me plenty for my height.
So the side panel will consist of a 60-inch top piece sewn to a 30-inch bottom piece, which means we only really need 3 panels of fabric instead of 4, since we can use the other half on the opposite side.
Okay, we're marking this to 30 inches. This is a 60-inch wide fabric, so I'm marking it at 30. On each side, I need a 60-inch fabric and a 30-inch fabric. So because I can use half of the 60-inch fabric for both sides, I only need 3 panels. And remember, the length that we need is 328, I think. Don't quote me on that. This is actually longer. This is 371 inches in length, and I did not show that, but we cut it just like we did with our top panel. Now that we have the line struck, we're going to put our tempered cutting glass underneath, and we're going to cut it out with a hot knife so that we don't have any raveling edges. This panel is cut to 30 inches like we discussed. This one is actually the width from the manufacturer, which is 60 inches, and is cut to the appropriate length. I'm going to apply 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas along this edge, very close to the raw edge, not sticking over, but almost on top of it. And this will help to baste our panels together, which makes the job easy. So what I do is when I get to the end down here, is I'm going to put the tape on the fabric, make sure that it's adhered well, and then because I have my weighted sandbag, all I need to do is move the weighted sandbag and reposition the fabric to where the seam stick stopped and continue basting. So I'll do this down the entire length of the panel. So as you can see, you can do this on a very small table easily. So I've got basting tape all along this panel, and I am not going to be working on the floor this entire time. So you'll be able to see how you can do this all on a small table that's 72 inches by, I think it's 48 or something like that. So we're going to go all the way to the beginning to where we started. So this is my 30-inch panel, and this is my 60-inch panel, and we need to baste it together, and there is no right side or wrong side. So I'm just going to take this panel and lay it. We're going to call this the outside surface and this the outside surface now, even though there's no right side or wrong side to this fabric. If there were, you need to have right sides facing each other. Right side, right side. These will go down on top of each other. We're going to line up the edges. So now what we want to do is we want to line up these edges. They don't have to be perfect because we have excess fabric, but I'm going to put them basically almost right on top of each other. And then we'll peel back the transfer paper of the double-sided tape, and I like to do it pretty much down the length of my table. So I'll stop here, and we'll start basting here, matching up the raw edges like that. And then I'm going to grab it back here, and I can simply pull. Sometimes the sandbag will keep you from pulling, so sometimes I remove the sandbag. See how we line up the edges? And if it's off a little bit, I can just unbaste it a little bit. I don't want to pull one side more than the other. So now that we have these panels and I'm working with it, I don't necessarily need a weighted sandbag on top because I'm basically holding it as I go. I'm going to baste to where I pulled off the double-sided tape, make sure it's stuck down well. And then I'm going to pull this panel, these 2 panels, down the length of the table and line it up again. She is basted all the way to the end, and I have some excess here on this 30-inch panel. No big deal, I'm just going to let it hang off there. I should have plenty of fabric on the 60-inch. Now we're going to transport it to the sewing machine. I'm going to put my deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide on the 1/2 inch of the needle plate, which is right there, basically in line with the needle, so that if my fabric's up against that, I know I'm sewing a 1/2 inch from the raw edge of the fabric. And there's no real reason to do any reversing since this is going to be cut to size. I'm going to put my one hand out here and this hand over here, grabbing the fabric together, and when I reach this hand, I'm going to reposition this hand here. I'm going to reposition this hand here, straighten out the fabric, and sew. I'm keeping the fabric up against the edge of the deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide. I'll bury my needle if I'm out of the fabric in case I lose my position. And I will repeat this process. Put my hand here, put my hand here. I have about 1.5 feet of area that I can sew. Okay, I've finished my first stitch. Now what I like to do is I like to just pull my fabric all the way back to the starting point, and I let it just kind of sit there on the floor because that'll make it easier for the next step. So this is my 30-inch panel, and I want this to go in the throat of the sewing machine, which means I really need to be starting from the other end. So I'm just gonna basically flip this around so I grab the other side, because the shorter panel going in the throat of the sewing machine is a little bit easier. Okay, so there it is. So there's my stitch. So my 60 inch is out here. My 30 inch is over here. This is going to go into the sewing machine like this. My 60 inch up here is where the top's going to be. So rainwater will come down like this. And we want this to be folded like this, so it's kind of like a shingle, so rainwater drips down like this. If I take the tail, which is the seam allowance, and I flip it the other direction, flip it down like that, then what I have is I have a gutter basically for the rainwater to come in here. So it isn't a serious problem, but you always want to try to think about what's the best way for water to run off. And it's definitely with the tail flipped up like this. So that's the way I'm going to do it. We're just going to sew. I'm going to bury my needle, and I'm going to get this fabric started in here. Now I don't want to sew any excess fabric, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically put it in my lap, get this fabric underneath the throat, and then I can feel pretty much, I'm going to pull the fabric, splay it apart, and I can feel basically where that tail is. The tail, I'm sewing through the tail here. Once you get going, this is going to be nice and fast, but it takes a little bit to get everything started. And I like to bury my needle so I don't lose my spot every time I make adjustments, because I don't want to have the fabric slip. Shove that material in there. So now I've got my fabric pretty much underneath the throat, and all I'm going to do is kind of splay it left and right with my hands and try to keep it as straight as possible so it looks good. I can feel that tail, because sometimes you want to feel to make sure it's hanging on the right side, which is the left side. Okay, my needle's buried, so I'm going to shove more fabric under here, put some more on my lap, and so on. Now, this would be a little bit more difficult if you didn't have a workbench like we have, the industrial sewing table. You can always reach under your fabric and you can feel the tail going the right direction. So if you want to be confident, you can do that. But I can pretty much feel it up here.
In this chapter, we're going to cut a strip off the top of the side panel. It'll be used for our horizontal zipper later on. We'll be installing 2 horizontal zippers along the top of our side panel so that it can be removed to make the fabric more manageable for installation and removal of the cover. To do this, we're going to cut about a 4-inch flap of fabric off of each of the side panels at the top. This will allow us to put the zipper approximately at the 4-inch location of the top of the side panels.
This is the top edge here, and this is a 60-inch panel that goes down to the seam, as you can see here. And you notice those small little wrinkles in the seam here? That is not uncommon, so don't be worried about that. So let's go back to this top edge of the 60-inch panel, which is right here. What I want to do is I want to cut a strip off because we're going to have a zipper opening in this, and I want that strip to be 4 inches, and that's where we're going to create a zipper. So I'm using the clear acrylic ruler, and I'm lining it up to the raw edge so I can mark a line 4 inches from the edge. We'll do this all the way down its length. Again, what I do is I just move the sandbag, pull the fabric, so I don't have to work on the floor, and continue to mark. Now, one of the things, since this is going to be a zipper, I like to mark across, and I'm actually going to just put A here. I'm not going to put it on every mark, but we need these marks to line up the zipper. In a long length, you need to have a mark about every 2 foot. Now, I'm not measuring this. I just have marks that are going to be placed about every 2 foot approximately over across of our fabric. And then we'll cut it with a hot knife. But that way, when we sew the zipper on, we're going to expect some shrinkage. And this will allow us to get the zipper on accurately. Okay, I have the tempered cutting glass under here. And I'm going to cut off this strip now. And I'm going to use a Sailrite Edge hot knife. We have a corded version that's less expensive, and this battery operated version, which is untethered, and this is the one I love to use. This seals the edge nicely, so when we sew our zipper in, we don't have any unraveling.
To sew on the horizontal zippers, we have to first find the patterns for the corners.
So I'm just going to cut from mark to mark, and I'm not adding any for seam allowance yet. I will do that later on. There's a pleat, but I know that I just need to go from mark to mark. So cut down, lining up the marks, and we will do this for both patterns. So this is the bottom. We stopped marking here, and we have excess material in here. We don't really know where the bottom is. We're going to use our 84 inches down from the top to determine where this stops. We're going to do the same thing to this second corner panel. Cut it right on the dash marks. I'm going to go ahead and label this top, and this is the front, because if you look at the panel, this is the top, and obviously this would be the front side, and that side would be the back side, so I don't get confused. Top, front. This is my pattern that we took on the RV. And what I want to do is I want to find the widest part, which is right here where this pleat is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it up to where this zipper is going to be installed and give myself an inch or 2 extra like that. And then I'm going to mark where this joint was in the RV, because this is where I'm going to have my zipper come down vertically. This is my horizontal zipper. So this is where that zipper will start, and this is where approximately this one will come down. So now we can move this pattern material, because we have plenty of excess material here. When we get to the other side, we'll have even more excess material. That's why we want this to be a couple inches from the edge. So here's where we mark the pattern material. I want to start my zipper 2 inches from this locale. This is all lined up here, and I'm going to put my zipper on this first. So you can see I'm 2 inches from that mark, and this is where my tail or flange for the zipper will be. So here's where our pattern was. This is 2 inches over here, and I marked here. We're going to show a clip showing this done. What I want is I want that the vertical zipper to come down approximately here. I want the top zipper to come all the way over here, but I'm going to make the flange cover that. So it's going to basically have a flange here, and we'll show that in a finished piece here so you can understand that. Okay, so here we are all done, and this zips to here like that. This has a starter box here and opens up nicely and has a flange that covers this. This would actually cover here, and you could put a snap here if you'd like to keep that down. And all the rainwater will go this direction.
This is the top, front side. This is a strip that we cut off of the 60-inch material. This is the zipper flange with the finished edge. It's going to go on not at A but here, and it's going to be basted on like this. Now the zipper has to be basted on in a similar manner. So let's take a look at that. So we need to separate the zipper halves. So now we have two halves, the starter box and the pin. This is the box over here. So this is what I want to use here. So this goes on so that the teeth would go towards the inside like this. However, the slider has to have the puller facing down against the zipper flange. So to do that, I'm going to walk all the way to the end, and I'm going to cut the stop off, okay, which means I have to install another stop. So right there, and I'm going to use a hot knife to make sure this end doesn't unravel. Okay. And now I'm going to take this slider and I'm going to zip it all the way to the end, and I'm going to stop short so I know which way it is. Okay, so here we are coming to the end, and I want to reverse it. So I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to put it back on. And I'm going to pull it all the way to the box. And now my flange goes on this top piece like that, and this goes on with the teeth facing towards the fold, and now my slider is facing down. So this is perfect. So we want to baste this zipper to this first. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put my zipper down for now, and I'm going to put a 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas along the edge of my zipper flange, starting here at the end. And I'm going to do this all the way down its length and get it as close to that edge as possible, because I don't want the glue to be sticking out from my zipper. So we're going to do this not all the way down the length of this, because this is cut too long, because we're going to use it for other applications like on the vertical zippers. This is the horizontal zipper. So I'm going to stop at about 322 inches, somewhere around there, putting double-sided tape on. So we have the double-sided tape on the zipper flange. Now we're going to put it on this top strip where we plan to begin applying the zipper. And again, we're going to put it very close to the raw edge of the fabric, and we're going to run it down to the 322 inch point approximately. We're going to take the double-sided tape off of the zipper flange. We're going to take our zipper, move the slider, and we're going to put the end of the box about 1/8 inch away from the edge that we finished, and we're going to baste it on so that it's even with this edge all the way down its length. When I get to my slider, I'm going to move the slider back. So notice the slider's down, the zipper's facing towards the fold over here. This is perfect. I'm going to do this all the way down the length to the 322 inch location approximately. We don't know exactly where it's going to stop until after it's sewn, when we get our shrinkage. Since we cut the stop off of this, we need to install another stop. Now you can do it with a stainless steel zipper stop for a Vislon, or you can actually sink a tooth in there and use a hot knife, or you can use these new snap cap zipper top stops. So I'm going to place it on the tooth, I'm going to twist it a little bit, and then I'm going to push down and twist like that, and it should go all the way in to the end. As you can see, the teeth are kind of sticking out of this little hole here, or they're flush with this hole is what I should say, and that is installed appropriately, and it doesn't easily come off. So this is just one approach to a zipper stop. Now our slider, when it's zipped up to here, won't come off. Now this is an 180 inch zipper. we need to start another zipper because we need it to be longer than that. So we're going to have 2 zippers going horizontal, which means I need to separate the new zipper. This too is 180 inches and it's too long, but we can always cut it off and put a stop on the end. Okay, so now I have my box again. Make sure you save the other half. I would like to zip to this point and then start it here and zip straight down so I don't have to change my procedure. However, if I base it on like that, the slider's up again. So I'm going to take this all the way to the end, cut off the stop, and reverse it around just like we did before. We can continue to base this, and I like to put about 2 inches of space. There's no right or wrong between the stopping of the other one and this one. It gives a little bit of breathability and so forth, but it also means that you don't have to work on top of another zipper. We're going to base this down to the 322-inch range approximately. This is my approximate stop location, so I'm going to peel off the transfer paper to that point, and I'm going to base to that point, and I'll probably mark the zipper because sometimes I don't pay attention to where I need to start and stop sewing. So I'm just going to put a mark with the soapstone on the zipper, and we don't know whether or not we'll need more or less, but we can determine that later on. So now I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning point, which is here, and now I'm going to peel off the transfer paper on this top. I don't want to call it a flange. It's basically just where the zipper is sewing into the top of the cover, and the top will actually be sewn to this. So this is a side, this is a side, this is a side. Top will be sewn onto this, and this keeps my zipper from being close to that top. Let's see. This is where we want the flange to start. So I'm going to put it right on that mark that we made that's 2 inches from this mark. And we're going to base this to this edge. Okay, just like this. So here's how this is going to work. This is the outside surface. Obviously, this is the outside surface. This will have a stitch here, preliminary stitch, and then this will be folded, and this will be folded, and you'll have a top stitch here. So this will be the outside surface, that'll be the outside surface, and then the zipper will be pointing in the right direction, as you can see here. So we're going to base this all the way down its length. Now, since this is several layers, what I like to do is I like to staple it about every 3 foot or so, just to make sure that when I take it to the sewing machine it doesn't come unbasted and then I have to worry about that. So I'm going to put a staple in about every 3 foot approximately, just to keep it all together. Here's my assembly, and here's my approximate end point, which will be my start point, because I'm just going to feed the teeth over here towards the right side of the presser foot. That's what the bottom side looks like. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to get it under the teeth so that the teeth are against the right side of the presser foot. I'm going to move my needle to the right so that I get my stitch as close to the teeth as possible, but I'm not using a roping zipper foot. I wouldn't want to be right on the teeth, but I want to be close to them. And we'll show you that measurement later on. Now, this is easy to do. Since everything is basted in place and even stapled, I'm going to sew right over the staples, and I'm going to just keep the teeth up against the side of the presser foot. So you can sew pretty stinking fast, and it's nice and straight. So check to make sure that if it's become unbasted, then you want to obviously fix that. But if you've done it right, it should just be a matter of sewing a stitch all along the zipper's teeth, as seen here. We're doing a 6mm straight stitch. Okay, I'm coming to the slider. I'm going to bury my needle. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to move the slider past the presser foot, hopefully. There we go, got past finally. I'm going to lower my foot. Now here I've got double-sided tape, and I do want to take that off because there's no reason to leave that there. It's just going to collect dirt. So I'm going to roll it off, and I'm going to break it there, and then I can actually just tuck this under the little residue. There we go. So we're going to sew past that without doing it. We don't need to do reversing. This is our first stitch, but I am going to run into this starter box. So what I like to do is I like to actually just hold the starter box to the side to make sure that the presser foot doesn't run into it. Sew past it, and then continue to the line, and we'll just continue to sew now. We're going to remove the staples and prepare for our top stitch. So at the ends, we're going to have an excess piece of fabric that's about this length. It's about 20 some inches. We're going to put a top stitch in this, but we're going to stop the top stitch at the appropriate spot here. On the other end, we don't know exactly where the appropriate spot is. So we're just going to fold the material, and we're going to start sewing that direction and put this top stitch in. When we reach that stopping point over there, we're going to stop, and then we're going to take it over to our piece and start doing our match-up marks. Now I'm going to remove the bobbin here because I'm doing a top stitch. I have probably half the bobbin, but I don't like to run out in the middle of a top stitch. It's okay if I do. I'm going to put in a full bobbin here, so I don't even have to worry about running out of the bobbin down below. Okay, here's my zipper that I just got done, and I'm going to splay this out like this. Now I've got that box I've got to contend with again, but it should be possible to sew in this flange easily. So I've got my needle all the way to the right again. That's where I want it. I want to sew very close to that fold, and all you have to do is pull the fabric out, and I'll show you what it looks like because it'll make more sense after I sew this. So I'm going to do some reversing here. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull left and right and sew very close to that fold. And I'll show you how the zipper is underneath after I get some distance here, so this makes more sense. Okay, let's show you. So my needle's buried, so I'm not going to lose my spot. So what I'm doing is I'm sewing very close to that splayed out fold here, which looks great. That keeps the flange over top of my zipper. And if I pull the flange back, look at that. There's my zipper going the right direction. If I look at it from the underside, there's my zipper. Here's my zipper flange. And here's the top piece of fabric where we're going to have the top sewn onto this edge here. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that my teeth, if you look at it from here, are splayed out going that direction, okay? And then I'm sewing into this. So, and it really does that naturally as you do this. This is so easy, yet it looks like a real professional job. So again, just sew a foot at a time or less, spreading out your assembly. Pull left and right, and then use this edge and the inside right side of the presser foot as your guide to install your top stitch, because your top stitch is noticeable. Now I'm almost to the slider, so I'm going to bury my needle. I'm going to lift my foot. There's my slider. I'm going to zip the slider past. Okay, the slider's passed. I'm going to lower my foot. Now I don't have to worry about running into that. We're going to do this down the entire length. What I found is it's better to have this go over your shoulder like you see here than to take your hands and splay it in front and sew, and then splay it again in front, make sure everything's nice and flat, and sew. This is a lot faster process, and it's easy to keep it nice and straight. So here's where that transition is between the one zipper and the other with that stop on it and the starter box. It should just be possible to sew right past that without doing anything special. No reversing is necessary or anything. So I ran into the approximate end, and I'm not going to do any reversing or anything because we might have to make modifications to that. So we're going to lift this out, and we're going to stop at that point and take it over to our cover now. So I've got this top thing done with the zipper and the flange. Now we have to contend with the shrinkage, and that's why we did the match-up marks. So to be assured that when we zip this side to this,
that the zipper ends come out even, we need to pull the slider to the starter box and run the other side of the zipper into it. So we're going to zip this all the way 180 inches for us. Okay, notice we cut one end off, that's why one end is a little bit longer. And now we're going to take the other zipper and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to zip it together. We're going to go to the beginning where we labeled A. What I need to do is transfer the matchup marks. This is where it begins here. This is the A lined up. Here's a matchup mark which will line up to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer all matchup marks by doing this. They're going to be over here. We're going to put them on the flange and then we're going to transfer them to this. Now you don't necessarily have to put it on the flange. You could just lift it up. I think I'll just do that. So here's the matchup mark, the next one. I'm going to lift this up and just transfer it to the other side of the zipper. So we'll do this at every single one of these matchup marks. Now that we have the flange marked, we can unzip the zipper. And I'm just going to unzip this first one to begin with. Then we'll get to the second one later. So there it is. We can move this out of the way. So the zipper would go on here, and we want to make sure that every matchup mark is lined up with the matchup marks on our fabric. However, the zipper goes down like this because we're going to sew it here and then it's going to be folded like this, which means the matchup mark is really not on the right side of the zipper, but we still did the process right. So we're going to transfer this mark to this side on all the locations just so we can see it easier. Okay, there's our starting point. We're going to put double-sided tape really close to the raw edge of this canvas piece all the way down its length, stopping at around 322 inches where we're estimating that the zipper will stop. So I'm going to just move the fabric and get the double-sided tape on here, and then we'll show you what's next. We're going to peel off the transfer paper, and this zipper will not go down without being off, especially the further down you go. So what I'll do is I'll start it. Remember, the teeth go to the inside. This is the outside surface facing up. We're going to put it on, and then I'm going to come over here to this next matchup mark, and they're lining up perfectly. So I'm going to, it's a little teeny bit off. I'm going to pull a little bit on the zipper, and then I'm going to base that down. Now, as we go down the panel, you're going to see this even more. So here's our last matchup mark. And the way I like to do this, because eventually it gets more and more off, is I like to actually put my finger on that mark. That's why we put them so close together. This one, notice it's a little bit off actually. This is the zipper stretched a little bit, which is really strange. Isn't usually that way, but no big deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down pressure here, and I'm going to match this up here and baste it, and then I'm going to distribute the unevenness so that I don't get any major wrinkles. Usually I'm pulling the zipper. In this scenario, I'm actually shrinking it up a little bit. So I am going to put very, very small wrinkles that will not be noticeable in this when I'm done. And then I'm going to smooth it all down. So there we go. That one's on. So now let's move to the next one. And I don't necessarily need to keep moving my fabric. I'm just trying to stay close to the camera. This is lined up. I'm going to peel off more transfer paper. Here's my next mark. It's actually lined up nicely. So I'm going to put that matchup mark on here. I'm going to stick it down with my thumb, and then I'm just going to make sure that it's against the raw edge here. Here we didn't have to do any stretching or anything. So now let's go to the next one. I really want to show one where I have to stretch it, which will probably happen. No, maybe not. This one's actually lined up too. So we're having good luck matching up this assembly. It didn't shrink as much as I was thinking it may. Let's check out the next one. Next one, we're a little bit actually shy of it, so I'm going to reduce the zipper flange slightly. So all you're doing is doing this down the entire length. If you have to stretch the zipper, you can, because you have matchup marks every few feet. That's perfect. As long as you're on a matchup mark, that means this panel and this top panel will be lined up perfectly when you zip them together. Here's our second zipper, and I have a match-up mark right there at the end, which means it gets basted right there. And we'll just continue to make sure that the match-up marks are on top of each other. If you sewed the other half with a lot of upper tension and it got a lot of wrinkles, you would find that you'd have to be stretching the zipper more, but we sewed it on with probably about the perfect amount of tension. That's why I'm not having to stretch the zipper to get the match-up marks to line up perfectly. They are lining up perfectly. We're going to move the needle bar to the left to get closer to the zipper's teeth, as close as possible with the standard foot. This is our approximate starting position. I'm going to lower the feet, and I'm going to sew with our 6mm stitch length down the length of the zipper. We're going to do this all the way down the length of the two zippers that we have basted in place, being sure the match-up marks are directly across from each other. As you can see, they are. Then we'll do a top stitch. So I pulled the fabric back to where we began, and this is our approximate stop point. So now I'm going to fold this back to create a fold that is right on that first stitch. And we're going to do a top stitch in this. We're going to position this so that the outside of the right presser foot is up against the teeth, and then I'm going to move the needle, I think, to the center position. Let's see if that actually catches the fabric. Yes, it does. However, yeah, I think I want to stay in the center position so I catch the zipper. So I'm going to leave the needle in the center position, and I'm going to fold the fabric back and basically just splay it open on that first stitch. And we're not going to do any reversing here at the beginning. And this is done really fast as well. This is such easy work. It's just, unfortunately, there's a lot of sewing. So what does it look like? Well, here's what it looks like. So you can see I have a top stitch with a very nice fold here. And if you turn it over, you can see I have two stitches, the first stitch and the second stitch, and it's well within the zipper's flange. So this should be a strong application. And when you put the zipper's flange over the top of all of this, it protects it from the weather. So we're going to do this down the entire length. And I'm going to put this hand and go over here like this and kind of pull. This hand is going to be in front. I'm going to grab it about, 8 inches from the needle, and sew. And we'll just keep repeating that. Stop there. Put this hand here, make sure it's folded nicely under like that. Pull the fabric a little bit to the left, and sew. So here we are coming to the end. And we will do some reversing right there because we know this is a dead stop end. There we go. That looks great. Okay, we should have stopped 2 inches. Remember we said we were going to stop here and not sewing this? This is fine where it's positioned, but I didn't want to sew the 2 inches in because we're going to have a zipper going up vertical. So I'm going to tear these stitches out. Now don't cut the zipper because you definitely need that zipper to be there. Just the stitches need to come out at that 2-inch location. So we have this taken off here. This will make it easier for us to actually insert this pin into the box and zip it up. So you really should stop sewing there.
Our side panel is removable via 2 horizontal zippers and 2 vertical zippers that are 318 inches apart. So we want the horizontal zippers to start and stop at that location.
We know that we want our zippers that go vertically to be 318 inches. Plus, we know that they're going to be 1.5 inches from 2 ends. So that's plus 3 inches. So I need to measure 321 inches, not 322 as I said before, because we actually have it about 1.5 inches over. So 321 inches is my goal. I'm just going to use my table again because my table is 72 inches, and I'm going to mark it where it falls here because I want to do this after I'm done sewing in case we had shrinkage, and I'll just put a mark right here. So that's 72, and then here's another 72. We'll just put this mark at the corner, and
repeat that until I come up with 321 inches. So 33 more inches is right here. Wow, look at that. It's almost right where we wanted it to stop. So this is the 321. We do not want to cut this. This is our top, and we want this to go all the way to the end. We only want to cut the flange and the zipper. Now we don't want to cut it right at 321 because we need to fold the material back. So I'm going to cut just the zipper flange and leave enough so that we could fold it back. And I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it perpendicular to the edge. And then I'm not going to use my good scissors for cutting the zipper, but I'm going to just cut the zipper a little bit long because we can deal with that later on. Okay, so that we get rid of that right now. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to open this up because I want it to end basically across from this mark, which is right about there. There's where the mark is. And I'm going to open this up with a seam ripper, and I'm actually going to open it up a little bit longer so that I can splay it open because I want to finish this end. I'm going to take out some of these stitches as well. Okay, so now I can open this. Okay, with this open, I'm going to put some double-sided tape across the top. There's not much space to work with, so please pardon my hands. They're kind of in the way. Like that. Make sure it's stuck on well, peel it off. Then I'm going to fold this down to create a finished edge. And I'm going to make sure that it's looks good when it's folded together. So don't have much space, so it's a little bit difficult. But what I want is I want it to look nice and finished. Let's see if we can push that out a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, we want to sew this all back together again, but first we want to sew the stitches that we took out and finish up this end. So I'm going to put it in the machine, and I'm going to move my needle so it's on top of those previous stitches, and I'm going to go over top of them by about 2 inches or so. Right there. And we'll move the zipper out of the way so we can sew this. When I get to the corner, I'm going to bury my needle at that corner, pivot on the buried needle, and sew this down this side. Just do a little bit of reversing, very small reversing so I don't see the reversing. And now that flange has a finished edge. Okay, this has a top stitch in it, as you can see here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to act like it doesn't have a top stitch here and just sew my first preliminary stitch like we did before. So we're just going to sew across this until I get to the end. Do a little bit of reversing. And then we're going to splay it open. And do our top stitch yet again. Finish our top stitch that we took out. I'm going to move the needle to the left position, or the right position, I'm sorry. I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here. We're going to sew all the way to the end, and I'm going to do some reversing here. There we go.
Now we'll be installing the vertical zippers in the side panels.
Now we're going to slice at this location for our vertical zipper, and we're going to use a T-square for that. I'm going to put a T-square on this mark that's about 2 inches from the end of the zipper, and then I'm going to put this T-square on the seam to make sure that it is perpendicular to the edge of the fabric at that seam. Okay, once it is perpendicular to it, I'm going to take my soapstone and strike a line all the way. And then we'll extend the line going the remainder of the height of the panel. I'm going to place the tempered cutting glass underneath the fabric, and I definitely want to use a hot knife. I do not like edges that unravel, especially when we're sewing so close to them with zippers. At the top, we do not want to cut the zipper, so we're going to move the zipper out of the way here, and we're going to cut on that line that we struck. So just don't cut the zipper. So here I've got that slice made, and I do need to take this top portion and I need to zip it to this portion. So I'm going to start the slider here, and I'm going to zip about 3 foot or so, like that. This stitch stops here in that you have a raw edge. We're going to flip this top one over, and I'm going to put a 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas right against this raw edge. This is going to be folded. It's going to be a very small hem, a single hem, and it's going to match the hem here at the zipper, because otherwise it'd look a little strange if it didn't, which means it's only going to be folded over, what is that, like a 1/4 inch or so. And I'm going to secure it down hard so I know basically where this panel starts and stops. I'm not going to sew it yet. Okay, so that's hemmed over. This one here, this is the outside surface. I'm going to fold it back, and I'm going to mark 1 inch from the edge with my clear acrylic ruler, which is hard to see through because the color of the fabric is so dark. So there's 1 inch. Mark there. And then I'm going to use the double-sided tape on this edge. This doesn't have to be right up against the edge. It can be a little bit inside that edge, as you can see. And I'm going to fold this back to that 1 inch line, which creates a 1/2 inch hem here. Okay, now this will raise this panel up, but that's not a big deal. That seam at 30 inches or 60 inches down is not going to line up anymore, but that's not a big deal. It'll be fine. Don't let it fret you. Put this back up again. Now we take this and we secure it to this, or zip it, I should say. And we zip it about 2 or 3 feet. Okay. This is hemmed. Hopefully it stays together for you. And we need to determine where this is going to rest over the top of this. So I'm going to take my clear acrylic ruler and I'm going to place it at a 1/2 inch from the folded edge of this panel down here, and I'm going to strike a line. Okay, so this hemmed edge will fall directly on that line once we have these panels together. So now I'm going to hold this in place. Now I know where this zipper stops, and this zipper is going to stop or come to rest right there. So I'm going to mark that edge where that zipper is. This is my zipper flange that we have left over from taking it from the top, and I intended to have extra so I could run my zippers vertically. So we're going to remove the stitching so we can open it up and finish this in just like we've shown previously. We're just going to fold this inward and create a finished edge. I'm going to take my Vislon zipper apart. So we have the starter box with its slider and the post. The starter box is going to go on this one. So we're going to lay this one aside. We'll do that one after we're done with this side. This side is going to have the starter pin be over here, and it's going to be facing this way because you can flip a Vislon zipper, so it doesn't matter. A coil zipper you can't do that with. And we want to start that very close to this top edge, just like that. It's going to go on, well, it's going to actually go on just a little bit underneath this area because we don't want these to come in contact with this zipper that's here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to baste this with the teeth facing towards the fold. And this is the finished edge that we just finished on, just like this. And we're going to have it come about an 1/8 inch away from this edge. Let's go ahead and baste this onto this panel first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put basting tape just a little down from that line that we made previously on this edge right next to that edge all the way down. This is a 1/4 inch. You must use 1/4 inch for zippers. Peeling off the transfer paper, and then we'll start basting again just a little bit underneath that line so it doesn't impede with the other zipper. We're going to baste right along this edge. This is the bottom edge, and it's not determined exactly where it's going to fall. I'm just going to cut it about 1 inch longer, and we are not going to finish this edge at all until we know later on where we want it to stop. Now I'm going to put basting tape on this raw edge here so that I can baste my zipper to it, and it's going to be very close to that raw edge. This is a 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas and upholstery. The one with the post, which is this one, and the zippers go in, not out. This is the outside surface facing up, and I'm going to have it come right up to the top, almost flush with that. And I'm going to baste this right against that raw edge, all the way down. Okay, I'm starting at the bottom. Doesn't really matter where you start. And I'm going to lower my foot, and I'm going to put my needle in the left position as close to the teeth as possible without getting too close. And we're going to sew down this side. No reversing is necessary. First stitch. We're going to sew past this end, basically all the way to the top. Not do any reversing there. Then we're going to go to the other end, and we're going to do our top stitch. So we're going to fold it out like this so the teeth are splayed out this direction, and we're going to do a top stitch right here, just like we did before. I'm going to move my needle to the right. And we're going to sew this. Make sure everything's splayed out nicely. So I'm coming up here to the top, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to continue this. See how the stitch that we made here is right like that? I'm going to continue this fold so it actually folds that under when I create this top stitch. And I want this hem to be in place too. There we go. Sorry, my fingers are probably in the way. And then I'm going to do some reversing there. There we go. Now, I should have marked over on this side as well. We need to reposition these because of the fact that I need to know where that zipper starts on that side. So I'm going to just match up this to that line that we struck here, like that. That's where those will be sewn together. So now that that's lined up, I can open this up, and I can just take my soapstone and mark directly across right there where that end of that post is, and that's where I'll start the zipper on that side. I'm applying basting tape to the main panel here so we can baste the zipper with the starter box. And we are going to stop the zipper, or start the zipper, I'm sorry, at the mark here at the top here. So there's our mark, and I'm going to hold my finger there and break the double-sided tape. I'm going to peel back the paper, and I'm going to baste the zipper in place here. Now notice the teeth, they have to go inward towards, this is the outside surface, but my puller is on the wrong side. So I need to pull this all the way to the end. And I need to cut the starter off. I'm going to use my good scissors for this, but I'm going to be careful. So I'm going to take my slider off, and I'm going to reverse it on. Come on, baby. There we go. Okay, so now the slider is down, and I will start my box right there because that's where the post stopped, and I'll baste this down just like this, all the way down this side. Now You may notice that I did not do match-up marks like we did with the long zipper. That's because this is a shorter zipper. It's only 84 inches, and also the bottom side's not finished, so it's not as crucial. We're going to take this off because we don't need to contend with it. Now we can take this to the sewing machine. All right, we're going to first sew. Needle's going to go all the way to the left so we get closer to the zipper's teeth. I'm right beside the starter box, so it's a little bit cumbersome, but I'm going to sew past that pretty quickly. I'll do a little bit of reversing, and then we're going to sew right up next to those teeth. Before I get to the slider, I'm going to bury my needle, lift my presser feet, move the slider. Okay, if I can't do that, I'm going to lower my feet and I'm going to raise the needle and I'm going to move the slider and then start sewing again. We're going to go back up to the top here, and we are going to create a fold here at the top. We're going to fold this raw edge. So I'm going to cut my extremities here. And I'm going to fold this back and basically fold that same amount up here at the top and put it on top of that zipper up there. Okay, and then I am going to put it under the presser feet. I have to raise the feet a little bit. And I have to make sure that the presser feet aren't on top of this, the teeth back here. So I'm going to move this to the right. And I'll start sewing here. Okay, so you can see that we don't have this all sewn down, and I should reinforce this. I didn't sew here because I couldn't get close enough to those presser feet. So I definitely want to reinforce this edge. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here, and then I'm going to sew up to that point, and then do some reversing a couple times. There we go, and that should do it. Since we don't have any reversing here and there's really nothing reinforcing this area, which can be under stress, I'm going to put it in going backwards and reinforce that area. So I'm going to put my presser foot down and I'm going to move my needle to the left here, and we are going to do some reversing all the way up to those teeth that we couldn't reach before. So see, notice I got right into that zipper's flange, and then I can reverse backwards. And I know this looks kind of cumbersome, that's because it is. Now we got it nice and reinforced. Okay, so now we're gonna zip this on by doing that. Makes it easy. Zip about 3 foot down, and we're gonna zip this side on. This goes up. The pin goes in. And that zips down. So what we have here is we have a flange that covers this flange, and you could put a snap here after you're done. Now this is going to be basted to here. Now this is a weird stitch. I'm basically just doing an overlapping stitch, but I do have a single hem here in the material, and I have a very small hem here, so we're going to baste those together. This time I'm using the 3/8 inch basting tape. You could use the 1/4 inch here too, but I just want it to stick well. And I'm going to peel this off, and then I'm going to place this, which already has that small little single hem in it, right on that line that we struck. Like that, and we're going to do 2 rows of a straight stitch here. There we go. And it's slightly off, no big deal. Okay, we're going to put this in, and we're going to just follow the same stitch line here. So I'm going to put my foot down, and I'm basically sewing right on top of that previous stitch, And I will do a little bit of reversing here. And this is one row. I am going to do 2 rows here. I'm going to put this back in the machine and start basically at that same locale with my presser foot on the outside of those stitches. And I'm going to do another row of stitches about a 1/4 inch from the first. Doing some reversing here. And now what we have is we have 2 rows of a straight stitch in basically an overlapping seam, which each has a single hem. Of course, it's not going through the single hem of the small panel above right here. No need to do reversing because this is going to be cut off with our pattern. So here's what it looks like on the underside. We did go through both layers there. We kind of missed a little bit here, but we definitely have 2 stitches. It should be quite sufficient.
Now we'll do the same thing to the other end.
The end of our zipper flange ends here. We're going to measure 1.5, 2 inches in. I'm going to go just about 1 3/4. 1.5 to 2 inches is fine. Mark that location. We're going to split the fabric just like we did on the other side, and we're going to follow that same procedure. Yeah, here we did the same thing again. We sewed it all the way to here. We actually want this bottom to be loose. It's okay for the top. So I'm going to break a few stitches here just so that we have this loose. And then we're going to put some zipper stops on this because we never did that yet. We're going to cut this off here and get rid of this. And we're going to put a zipper stop, 1 tooth in. I don't like to put it on the last tooth. And this goes on like this. Push, and then you twist it and until it snaps on so that it's flush with the top. And that creates a great zipper stop. So we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. On this one, we'll put it right here. Now we're not going to show you this entire process, but we did stage it exactly like we did on the other side. We have a hem here that equals this. We've striked a line 1/2 inch from this folded edge that has a 1/2 inch hem on this side. This would get laid up over here, which means the zipper here falls on this plane. And we're going to put the box over here on this one. Notice that the polar is facing down, the teeth are facing in. This is the outside of the fabric. We're going to put the zipper flange on this, which is, I believe, the back panel of this side panel. And the zipper pin will be placed here, very close to that edge, and it will be basted down just slightly under this line here like this. 1 stitch, top stitch, 1 stitch, top stitch, same process. We'll show you what it's like when we're done. Okay, so here we are all done, and this zips to here like that. This has a starter box here and opens up nicely and has a flange that covers this. This would actually cover here, and you could put a snap here if you'd like to keep that down. And all the rainwater will go this direction.
Now we can find that Durascrim pattern material and pattern the side panel's corners.
From vertical zipper, this one to the one all the way over here, we should confirm that it is our desired measurement of 318 inches, because we can always move the pattern further in or further out based on the fact whether or not it became that exact measurement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the table here, and I'm going to place that zipper right on the edge of the table, which is there, and I'm going to mark it at 72 inches because our table's 72 inches. So this is 72 inches from that zipper, and then we'll just keep pulling it and measuring until we can confirm that it's 318 inches for us.
So this measures 3/18 inches, and you can see that I'm a little bit off. That's why it's a good thing that we're measuring. So from the zipper, which is right there, I need to add 4 extra inches. And I don't think I have enough fabric over here for the pattern, so I'm going to add the 4 extra inches on the other zipper on the other end. That way I'm assured that I have the appropriate amount from vertical zipper to vertical zipper. So the zipper's teeth are here. I'm just going to mark it there, and I'm going to add the 4 inches here. So that means our pattern edge will be right there, and I'm going to mark it in a few different locations so that I can make sure that it's nice and straight. This is our pattern for the back side. It says out, and this is the correct side being out. If I were doing the adjacent panel, this would be flipped. So the out would be down, but this is the one we patterned for on the one side of the RV. So here are my marks that I just made. This edge should be on top of those marks, and we should bring this all the way up to the top until it touches the top here, like that. And then once it's in that spot, we're going to weight it down with a few weighted sandbags. So we're going to just trace around this. Now we do need to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Can't add it here. I'm not worried about that. It's where I want to add it is over here. So eventually we're going to be doing this and just run this into this top here like this. So right now I'm just going to trace beside the pattern, and then I'll add my 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you can see I have plenty of material. We have 2 pleats. This one's larger and it extends out to here, so I'm going to put my mark here and a mark here, which is right on top of the pleat. And then over here I'm going to put a period, and then I'll use a straight edge and we'll go out to that. We're going to do the same thing with the smaller pleat that's over here. Okay, we're going to move the pattern now that we have that traced, and I'm going to extend this line down. We have some extra material at the bottom here. Now we can either measure, or I can kind of guess at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to kind of guess at this and go all the way up. And I'll show you what I do when I get to the top. Okay, so here I'm adding the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and as I talked about, I'm going to transition it into the top.
You're getting way wider than a 1/2 inch there.
Just like that. Now here's our pleat. I'm just going to take a straight edge, and I'm going to go straight to that point and do the same thing here. This will take up that excess fabric. Might as well do this while I'm at it. I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch from that line I just struck, like that, like that. There's a little bit of seam allowance here, and then a 1/2 inch from this side, like this. And we'll cut that out, and I'm actually going to cut a little slit that goes almost up into this area here, but not too close. So right there, there'll just be a little slit. Let's go ahead and do that so I can show you how that's done. Okay, we're going to go ahead and cut the outside edge of this, and then I'm going to show you what we're doing with the pleat. And I have the tempered cutting glass on the bottom side. So we're going to follow that around. All right, so now that's separate. No, it's not. So we're going to be sewing this pleat together to kind of give it some shape here. So I'm going to cut out a 1/2 inch away from those lines that we made, like that, and then I'm going to cut in with a slit right there. And then these will be, later on, they'll be folded so outside surfaces are together, and we'll sew there, and that'll create some shape. So this is a very small pleat, but it does make a little bit of a difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slit it right down. Oops, that's a little bit too far. Right there. And not go that deep, so watch. Go just about to there, and we'll sew that together. So this is the outside surface. This is my one pleat. I'm going to fold it together so that it's lined up like this. And don't expect this to fall right where it needs to fall. It typically won't when you do a pleat like this because you're creating shape. And we are at the 1/2 inch location. I'm not going to, I might as well use this, just show you. So that's the 1/2 inch for the needle. The needle's in center position. And we will sew. And I'm going to sew to basically this point. There's my slit, which stops there. So I'm going to sew a little bit outside that end point. I'm going to do some reversing here when I'm in the 2 layers. And we're just sewing right next to that slit. I'm going to turn a little bit here because it turns a little bit. There's the end of the slit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn into the edge of the fabric slightly. There we are. And I'm going to reverse right here. Good. Now we're going to open this up and do a top stitch. So now we've opened it up. And how do I want my top stitch? Well, I don't want my top stitch to fold this way because this is where water may collect. I want it folded so the seam allowance is going up. And there is some bulk here because of this hem. Some reversing here. Pulling it apart so it's on top of that first stitch. And then here I'm just going to do some reversing. This is where I stop sewing. Okay, there's my top stitch. So now this has some natural shape built into it. And you'll see that later on when we take it to the trailer. Okay, because this created some shape, obviously we have some excess fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just basically come from here and transition into this 1/2 inch seam allowance without my hot knife. So this one is very small. This is the outside surface. It's going to be folded so outside surfaces are facing each other. Like so. Line up the edges like so. And this time I'm probably not going to sew exactly a 1/2 inch from each other, from the edge, because this one is so small, and I probably won't do a top stitch in this one. I don't know. I'm going to sew right along here to the point, and then I'm going to do some reversing all the way back, and one more stitch. So this one, you can do a top stitch. Yeah, might as well do a top stitch. Since this is where the rainwater is going to come down this way, we want the top stitch to be up so it comes off like a shingle, and we'll just sew in a little top stitch here. A little bit of reversing, and we are done. Doesn't seem like much, but it will make a little bit of a difference. So this pattern goes on top of the zipper here. Remember, we added our 4 inches to the other side, and the outside is facing out. So we have it lined up over top of the zipper. I can feel it here. So it's at the center of the zipper, and we want it up as far as possible. And we are going to repeat that exact same procedure with this one that we did on the other side. We're not going to show all this.
In this chapter, we're going to install 2 zippers in the side panel. This will give us entry into the side door. We need to measure the RV to determine where the door goes.
So I'm going to measure from my 318-inch point for us, which is right there at that ridge, and I'm going to create a door, zippered door opening. So I'm going to do it right about here, somewhere in that area. We just want it to be at least 5 or 6, 8 inches from the door here, and then we're going to make the door 45 inches, which is right about here, to accommodate for this, so this can be used. So we'll have a zippered door opening there. We'll write those measurements down.
This is our side panel that has the door, and this is the front, and this is the point where we measured. So what I'm going to do, I need to put a zipper at 73 inches from this location. So I'm going to put the zipper on the edge of the table here. And remember, my table is 72 inches long. So I can just use this to measure. So that means the zipper is going to be about here. I know that's probably 72. I'll probably move it over 1 more inch. So this is 73 right here, and then I'm going to use a T-square, and I'm going to line it up to the top here because we know that it's straight. And I'm going to strike a line going down. Now we want that panel to be bigger than our door, so we're going to go 45 inches from this location, so I need to move it down the table a little bit. So 45 inches is right here, which should allow plenty of space for the door and also for the door catch, which will be inside of this area. So we're going to strike a line in the same manner here with our T-square. We're going to pull the fabric down and continue the lines on towards the bottom. We put the tempered cutting glass on here. Now we definitely want to cut this with a hot knife to seal the edges. And we're going to cut up both lines, and we'll show you what we do when we get close to the zipper at the top. This is a Sailrite vinyl, and I'm cutting a 3-inch by 3-inch square, and we're going to use this to reinforce the top of our zipper. So because we do have to cut a slit in it, and this will just make it strong. This is a tough material, and we use it for Chafe resistant areas as well. So that's 3-inch by 3-inch. This is our outside surface, and this is the line we struck, and our zipper is going to stop up in here, and we want this to be on the underside. Doesn't matter which side, but on the underside of this, I should say. So I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to mark where that line is, which is right there, because it's laying on top of that line. And that means that I need to baste this on the underside, just like this. So I'm going to get some double-sided tape. I'm going to baste it on the shiny side, though it could be on the other side as well. And to make sure that it sticks well, I'm going to put it on all 4 sides. And then we'll baste it right here. I am going to put it flush with that zipper, just like that. And we'll do the same thing over here. All right, so here's our patch. Now you want to make sure that you don't sew this flap in. So you want to flip it up. If you do, you have to rip all your stitches out. So now the flap is up. That way we are assured we're not going to sew through that. And we're going to put this underneath the sewing machine. And we'll just start here. Sometimes it's easier, instead of going around the perimeter, is to just do some reversing at the corners and start on the next leg. I'll show you. So we can just do a little bit of reversing here. We'll sew across the top here. And if you want to, you could just bury your needle, lift your foot, pivot on the buried needle, because it's pretty easy to turn this at least once, like this. Lower your foot and sew down here. And at this corner, I'm just going to do some reversing. Again, because I'm going to actually lift this out of the assembly, because I don't want to not have to turn the whole thing around. And then I'm going to start this corner, do some reversing. Let me cut that thread. Sew to this corner, bury the needle, lift the foot, pivot on the buried needle, lower the foot, and sew to this corner and do some reversing. And there we go. That's all you need to do for that patch. We're going to fold this flange back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the zipper right here down about an inch and a half. So this is 1 inch, and that's the half right there. We're going to put a line across here that is about 3/8 inch on either side. So just about like that. So now we're going to slit up to that line, with a hot knife. This is the corded hot knife, just to show you how it works. And we're gonna slit all the way down to the bottom. Because I want to be precise, I'm going to use some scissors here, and I'm going to cut about 3/8 inch in, and then 3/8 inch in this way to create this T. I'm going to try to touch the edges of this with the hot knife a little bit, just to keep it sealed nicely. There we go. So that's what we have. This is my zipper plaque, and I have the top edge finished. And I don't want to start it here because then this could technically have water go down this. So I'm going to actually have it come up here like this. And then this is a continuous length zipper. It doesn't have a starter box or a starter pin. And I'm going to start it right there at this junction where the slit is. We'll probably have to cut a little bit into this flange, but we can do that after we have it sewn on. So this zipper is going to go on this side, which means I'm going to baste it to this about 3/4 inch from that edge. So I'm just basting with a 1/4 inch basting tape along the raw edge of this zipper flange, and I'm going to do it all the way down its length. And it will do it on this side and the opposite side. We'll show you what we mean by that after I get this side done. Okay, we have it on this side, and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to install it on this. This is the folded sewn side, and this is the raw side. And this time I'm going to go all the way to the end, and then we're going to baste the zipper to the other side. We'll show you that after we're done with this. We're going to touch the end of this continuous zipper with a hot knife to keep it from unraveling. There we go. And now I'm going to baste it so the teeth are facing towards the fold and about 3/4 inch down from the top. And we're going to baste it so it's flush to the side all the way down its length. I'm peeling off the transfer paper on the other side, and we're going to baste it just like we talked about. Zipper's flush with that T. This goes up above slightly, and it goes right down to that raw edge that we cut, all the way down the length of the slit. Now this is our door here, and I like the flange to be on the part that's not going to roll up, which is this part. So the door is here, flange should go here, and then on the opposite side the flange will go on not the door side but the cover side. That way when you roll it up you don't have to contend with this flange. Okay, I'm pushing the bulk of the fabric in so I can get to this zipper and the zipper flange, and I'm going to make sure that it's basted down. We know that we're going to have to start with the presser foot beside the zipper's teeth, so I'm going to lower this. I'm going to put my machine in left to get as close to those teeth as possible, and I'm going to start sewing here, but I'm also going to do some reversing backwards. I want to make sure that everything is laying flat. So I'm going to sew forward a little bit, and then I'm going to sew back off of the zipper flange and do some reversing there, and then sew straight down here. So this part is pretty easy. Just got to organize your fabric, and you'll be pushing the bulk of the fabric through the throat of the sewing machine as you sew, like this, and just sew down here. Everything's basted. The beauty of double-sided tape. Sew all the way to the end. And I want to sew on this side here. Okay, it seems like you sew here, but you don't. You sew on this side. So let's get that over here. Get these feet up a little bit so I can get under there. There we go. I'm gonna actually move this to the right. Do some reversing. And then we're going to sew down this to create the top stitch just like we did on all the other zippers. So this zipper is going to go on like this, facing opposite these teeth. And then when it's top stitched, it's going to be folded back like this. And it should take up a perfect amount of fabric, so this slit won't have any excess fabric. So it goes on like that, which means I need to put double-sided tape, 1/4 inch, along this side of this zipper. So we're going to do this all the way down its length. This is the other half of the continuous zipper. We're going to peel off the transfer paper, and it needs to be basted on so that it's flush with this one, like this, with the teeth going in the opposite direction. And we'll do this all the way down this side. Since everything is basted in place, I can start at the bottom edge because it's just convenient for where it is placed. Move the needle closer to the zipper's teeth so it's all the way to the left. And this will be my first stitch, and then we'll do a top stitch. No reason to do reversing here at the bottom. We don't know exactly where the bottom is going to fall. Here we're getting close to the top, and what I'm going to do is just do some reversing right here. Okay, now we got to do a top stitch, so I'm probably going to flip it all the way to the other end and do that. Not flip it. I'm going to start it at the other end over here. All right, now I'm going to flip my needle to the center position, and I've got my fold in here, so I'm doing a top stitch right on that first stitch. So we're just going to flip this all the way down its length and sew this top stitch. So here we're coming to the starting point, and we're just going to tuck this under like that and sew up to that and do some reversing. Let me get some excess fabric in here. There we go. Do some reversing, and that one is done. Now that our zipper is installed, we're going to install a slider, and I want it to zip down like this. So I'm going to put the fat end in first. And get one side started, the next side started. Remember, this does not have a starter box or a pin. And zip that down part way. Okay, so now we don't want this to separate here at the top. So sometimes people sew over it, but we're going to use what they call, or what we call, a zipper bottom stop. I know this isn't the bottom, this is the top, but this is where we don't want the zipper to come apart. So to install this, they're a little bit difficult to install. I'm going to put a rubber cutting pad on the bottom side directly under the zipper's teeth, and I'm going to put this fairly close to the end here in the zipper's flange and give it a press. Then I'm going to take a metal hammer and I'm going to hammer the prongs into the rubber cutting pad on the bottom side, and also on the two sides of the zipper like that. Okay, so now we can take out the rubber cutting pad and flip this over, and you can see the prongs right there on that side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this cutting pad on the back side to make sure I don't hurt anything with that. So I'm going to bend these inward like so, so they just start bending. You can see they're bent inward. Now, because I've got that pad on the back side, I can take a hammer. Because they're bent in the right direction, they basically grab those teeth. So now, this is the outside. When the slider comes up, it runs into that and it'll never come apart, which is exactly what we want. Now that we're done with this side of the door, we're going to move to the opposite side. Now, we have to consider the flange here, so let's talk about that before we go. Okay, so this is the door. You can tell that because this flange is going in towards the door. We want this flange to do the same thing, which means it's going to be basted onto this side of the slit.
And when it's done, it will fold into the door as well, so that we can easily roll this up without an excess flange on it.
It's now time to create the wedge for the extra height of the roof equipment. In this chapter, we're going to be creating that wedge we talked about earlier. This wedge will accommodate the height of the equipment on the RV roof. We'll need one for the right side and one for the left side, so you'll need 2 of these.
Out of our scrap, we cut 6 strips of material that's 16 inches wide. This will accommodate for the obstacles in the at the top of the RV. And I'm going to put a seam stick 3/8 inch along the edge, going up the 16 inch. Here's maybe different, of each one of these panels. Then we're going to base them together and sew them all together to make one long strip. So we're going to grab one of these panels, and then we're going to grab a second one. Remember, there's no right side or wrong side. We're going to lay it like this so that there's no seam stick on this one, and we're going to baste it together. And then we're going to do a semi-flat felled seam along this edge. I'm going to put 2 staples in the end because I'm going to roll this up, because it'll just make it faster. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull this back so I can see the double-sided tape. This is our outside surface, so we're going to take another panel and flip it and baste it in the same manner. So we just need to make sure that the outside surface, or that the seam allowance, is all going to be the same. So that's basted together. We're going to staple this, and when you look at this and you splay this out, you can see that our seam allowance is on the same side. So now we'll do the exact same thing yet again. So we're going to repeat these for all 6 of these strips. So we have all 4 of the panels basted together. I'm just going to take this tail end here and fold it up, and we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to put this at the 1/2 inch mark of the needle plate, and we're going to sew our first stitch of the semi-flat felled seam. And there's no reason to do any reversing because we're going to be cutting off probably the edges more than likely. Like that. Then all we need to do is pull the next one over like this and make sure there's not a second one underneath there, and do the next one. So this makes pretty fast production. I'm going to reverse here because I was a little bit away from the edge. Now remove all your staples. You don't want to have rusted staples in your cover. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the end, and I'm just going to roll. This double-sided tape here wasn't necessary, but I'll leave it on for now. We're going to roll this up so we can get it under the arm of the sewing machine easily and sew the top stitch next. Remember what I said? We're going to be doing this whole process on this small table, and I'm not going to be on the floor once. Haha. Yep, it's that easy. So I'm going to move the magnetic guide, and now that we have this all scrolled up, we can just go to each one of these seams and display it. Doesn't matter which direction, because it's not, water's not going to be running off this. This is basically going to be hanging vertical. Just make sure you sew through the seam allowance on the bottom side. No reason to do any reversing. Pull a little bit left and right, and sew about a 1/4 inch or so away from that first stitch. So once we're done with this, all we have to do is scroll to the next one. Make sure you don't have too much tension, otherwise you'll get puckers. You just want as minimal tension as possible. So now, just unscroll. There you get to the next seam, which is right there, and repeat the process. This is our ridge where we measured from here to here, and it's 318 inches. I also measured from this point to the front edge of this vent, and that was 72 inches to that edge. And then I measured up from the rooftop, and it was 7 inches high from the rooftop. I like to divide that by 2, so I have 3.5. From that point, I measured over to the middle of the air conditioner, because it's fairly large, and that is the highest point on the RV. It was 16 inches from the rooftop to the top of the air conditioner. Divided that by 2, got 8 inches. From that middle position, measured over 79 inches to the back of our antenna here, and we measured from the rooftop, got 10 inches, divided by 2, 5 inches. 47 from this vent, it's 6 inches from the rooftop, divided by 2, 3 inches higher, and then to the next ridge point is 48. So if you add these all together, 72, 72, 79, 47, 48 is 318 inches. What we need to do is we need to make a basically a triangle to accommodate for all this extra height, and it will be sewn in along here, this bottom edge. So this is my triangle. From this edge to this edge is 318 inches. It's a straight line. And then at 72 inches, I measured up 3.5, 72 inches, 8 inches, 79, 5 inches, have 47, 3 inches, and then 48, 0.
And then I measured the points out, and here's my long strip. And I did label the front so I don't get confused right here. And I think that's a good idea to label the front, maybe even the back. Now this straight line will be 318 inches, but it is true that these, if you measured from point to point, would be slightly different than 318 inches because it takes a arch up. But it is going to be so minimal that I don't have to worry about it. In the end, I'm going to have excess material at the top anyway, so we're not going to worry about measuring this distance. I don't think we need to.
Both sides will accommodate this wedge. We're now going to sew it to the side panel and the top. When the wedge is sewn to the top and the side panel, 1 whole inch of fabric will be used up for seam allowance, but that's okay. We will not add any seam allowance to the wedge.
The side that we cut with a hot knife is this side. That's where the top gets sewn on. This is a straight edge, and so this is where it'll be basted, and it'll be basted to here. Okay, so this edge is 318 inches, which means that this point, here's the 318 inches with the zipper. This point is going to start right there, and we're going to baste it to this flange all along here and confirm that it's the right size. So I'm going to get my 3/8 inch basting tape. So I'm going to start my basting tape where this vertical zipper comes up and put it there, and then baste all along this edge. And this is a long edge, going 318 inches for us, in other words, to the adjacent vertical zipper, and I'm going to stop.
Our mic ran out of batteries and we did not notice it. Once the double-sided tape is down the entire length, we'll start to peel the transfer paper off, and we'll baste, being sure that we are basting the straight edge down to the top portion of this side panel, starting at that vertical zipper. So we'll match up the raw edges and baste it down its length and check for its length when we reach the other side. Make sure that you baste with the seams on the outside portion. The finished edges should be facing each other, so outside surfaces are facing each other. And here's the opposite end where we reached the other zipper, and as you can see, it's about 4 inches past that zipper, exactly what we intended. So it looks like we're going to be just about perfect. Even if you were off a little bit, it would not matter much. Remember, this is just accommodating for the extra height in the equipment on the roof. So if it's off a few inches, don't worry about it. Okay, we finally discovered that our battery is dead. Here we go again.
We're going to unzip this panel to make this much smaller. So we'll only have the top edge and this to contend with. Okay, we want to sew a 1/2 inch from the needle. The needle's in center position, so I'm going to use my Deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide. At the beginning, we missed some of the fabric. Don't let that alarm you because it comes to a sharp point. First of our 2 stitches. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, and again it's going to go off of our panel that we sewed, but that's not a big deal. There we go, we're right off of it, and we're just going to stop there. Now we're going to do a top stitch. I'm going to peel off this excess basting tape so that it doesn't collect dirt, and kind of break it off, and then stick that back down. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way to the other end now. So what I don't want my top stitch, I don't want my seam allowance to be on the bottom because the water is likely to shed this way and it may get stuck in that gullet. So I'm actually going to fold it up, and don't be alarmed at the fact that there's excess fabric here doesn't have a top panel, because there will be a panel sew into that. I'm going to sew with the center foot, the left side right along this first stitch to create the semi-flat felled seam, and I'm going to move the needle to the left. So let's start right here. We're going to miss some of the fabric, no big deal. And I'll do a little bit of reversing now that we're in the fabric. So again, we're going to splay the seam allowance up so the water sheds better. Like that. Oh, we need to move this. It's going to go all the way to the end, and that's all we need to do. We can do a little bit of reversing there. This is the outside surface of our cover, and here's the notch that we made. This indicates where the 318 should be basted. And if we look at this, this is our panel that we sewed that piece on just a second ago. Let's see if we could figure it out. Okay, here it is. So here's the point of the 316 right there. So that means this gets basted so outside surfaces are facing each other, and it'll start right here at this point and then go this direction. So I'm just going to start the seam stick here, but we're going to obviously put it down this side as well. But I'm going to first baste down to the bottom edge. So we're going to put it all along this edge. And when we get to the end, I'm going to just move the panel like we typically do. And remember, we have extra fabric here at the bottom. But I'm going to run the seam stick all the way down here, even though we probably won't be using all this. Okay, now we'll pull it back to where our point is, right here. There's my point. Taking off the double-sided tape. Now this has some shape in it, so it's not going to just be a straight, easy baste. I'm going to start that so that the point's right at the end of this thing, this notch. Baste it here. Okay, you can expect some bubbles in here because of the fact that I'm taking a curve. Outside surfaces are facing each other. Okay, now look at this. This is a dog ear here. What we're going to do is we're just going to match it up so that the fabric runs like that. So you could trim that off, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to make the fabric make that turn. Now, this is going to be under a lot of stress, and you can see it's already coming undone. I forgot to staple. Remember we talked about that? So what I want to do is I want to base that back down and staple that. And I'm going to put a staple here because there's some shape. Basting tape is great, but when they're shaped like this, you've got to secure things down well. I'll put one here. A little bit of a curve here. We're just going to make the fabric take that turn. It causes a teeny bit of a wrinkle, but the wrinkle's on our seam allowance, so it'll probably be fine. Okay, we're going to baste all the way to the end. So here we are coming to the end. There's a little bit of shape built in this because it has to take a turn around the trailer. See the shape right here? We're going to baste that in to this edge like that, and as we can see, we have some extra material, which is what we planned on. So here's where we started, where our notch is. we're going to apply basting tape down the remainder of this side. We're going to peel off the transfer paper, and then from this point where we started, we're going to baste in the opposite direction. And again, this point is under some stress because it's got some shape built into it. So I'm going to staple it to hold it in place. And we're going to baste to the next, the notch that we made, which is actually 318 inches down the length of the panel. See my fabric here where we sewed this extra piece on, and this is matching up perfectly, and this is the new piece that we sewed on. This is how it transitions, which is just what we wanted. So as I'm basting here, here's my vertical zipper, and here's the end of that panel that was 320, and you can't see it probably, but there's my match-up mark. So I'm off by a good, oh, what is that, 4 inches. Now that's something that can actually be fixed by pulling more on this rather than this when you baste. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to about the halfway position and pull more on this panel, which will help to shrink up that gap. So watch. This is the halfway point, and you can tell it because there's the zipper that separates the top. And I'm going to take out the staples here, and we're going to pull from this juncture a little bit more on this top panel, which will hopefully help it to match up better. Okay, so I'm going to peel this up, and right now the basting tape's on the top panel, but it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to start basting from this point, and watch what I do. I'm going to hold my finger down here. I'm going to pull really tight on the top panel, which actually the bottom panel may actually have a few more wrinkles in it. So I could shrink up the bottom. See how the bottom is cupping a little bit? That means I'm shrinking it, and yet I'm pulling more on the top. And if I do this all the way down this length, more than likely it's going to reduce, it's going to increase the size of the upper panel. And then I'm going to restaple at that juncture. Here you can see these little small wrinkles? They're not going to show up in the end. And that means that we're doing exactly what I want. So we're going to keep doing this, and we'll show you what it looks like at the end. And we're only about an inch off now, and that is completely acceptable. So there's my point of 316, and there's my notch. And I'm happy with that. I'm going to staple it there. So now we just put basting tape on the remainder part of it, and we'll baste it down to the bottom edge. Okay, we're just going to sew our first stitch along that edge. We've got to have the deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide set at a 1/2 inch. So our stitch is at a 1/2 inch, our needle's in center position. Anytime I make adjustments, I bury my needle, adjust my fabric, and continue to sew. We're going to do this all the way down this side. So I've got the first stitch done. This is the bottom of it, and this is the zipper coming down, and we want, this is the side, but we want this seam allowance to go towards the left. Reason being is when you get to the top, then that'll create, because let's pretend this is the top, that'll keep the rain going this way like a shingle. So just look at that and make sure that you flip it the right way. If you don't flip it the right way, it's not a big deal, but it is preferable. So I'm going to do my top stitch now in the same manner that we've done every time. I'm going to put it to the right, my needle to the right, and I'm going to use the right side of the inside foot as my guide, and I'm going to pull the panel left and right as I sew. I can feel my seam allowance over here, so it's on the right side. I am going to do a little bit of reversing here. Now we're going to have to push this all inside the throat of the sewing machine as we go, but no need to scroll. This is that corner, and there's some shape built in this. There's a little pleat in there, and it takes a turn. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to splay the fabric out flat. I can feel the seam allowance. I'm still at the right spot. And I'm just going to slowly sew around that area. And then we should be coming to the straightaway now. So it's pretty easy. So we have this wedge sewing onto the top panel all the way over here, and we need to repeat that process for the opposite side of the cover. Since the process is exactly the same, we're not going to show this entire process. It's done in the same way. Just make sure outside surfaces are facing each other, and we will sew those together to this top.
The cover is not yet done, but this is the time to fit it onto the RV and mark for areas where propane is stored, where the bottom edge falls, where the heater exhaust vent is, where vents will be located, and for possible chafe-prone areas so that we can protect the fabric. This is a look ahead at the cover already completed, but the process for installing the almost finished cover is done in exactly the same way.
So the cover's on, and we have this obstacle which we intended to cut around, but you can see there's excess fabric here because this needs to be slit, and the seam is the center, so all I need to do is slit up to this edge, but I want to stop short of it. So I'm going to cut right on that seam, and then you should see the sides start to relax. Now we're getting closer to the top of this obstacle, so I'm going to stop right about here. But we'll have to cut a little bit deeper here, but I just want enough so that the fabric relaxes, about like that, so I can trace around this obstacle. So now the fabric relaxed, and it's relaxed over here, and I can see that I need to cut more away here a little bit, and also I have obstacle here, so we're going to cut a little bit more here. See how it relaxes. The more I do that, and then can I pattern around this? I probably could like this, but sometimes what you may want to do is, since we have plenty of fabric here, don't go too deep. That may allow it to relax a little bit more. I'll do it over here too. Now I can pull my fabric down and I can start marking. This is my finished edge, and you might want to get a second helper for this just to make sure that you pattern well. Oops, I don't want to move it too much. Yeah, we need to cut a slit there.
Almost has to come.
Well, I think this will allow it to relax. Like that. Does that allow it?
A little bit.
So I'm going to cut away some of this, but leave a lot of space here to see if we have what we're trying to accomplish. Cutting away the fabric like this should even allow it to take the shape even better. And I'm not trying to make it skin tight. Yeah, I actually think that's not too bad. I'm actually very happy with the marks that we made on there. I think that's where I'm going to have everything end. And I'm going to leave this excess fabric so I can do a double hem. So I'm good with that. So this is the highest spot right here. This is where the fabric stops. And there's the RV. So I'm going to measure that with my yardstick, and I get 13 inches. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go around the perimeter with the cover right where I want it and mark at 13 inches about every 2 to 3 feet with the yardstick on the ground. This way I know where to cut the cover for the double hem. So here's the front at 13 inches, which is right there. We do the same at the back too, all the way around. At this location we have the heater, which I can imagine that having a cover that opens up to allow you to heat the RV is a good idea. So I'm just going to trace around that. I've already got arrows here with a thing that says heat, but I want to know where that is. Okay, on the top, sometimes you can walk on this, but if you do, be careful. I can lean over and I can get chafe areas like where the antenna is just by climbing up a tall ladder and use my soapstone up here.
We're only going to show marking this one area for chafe protection, but if anything is sharp and may rip the fabric, be sure to mark it.
We're going to put 2 vents in the cover on both sides. And I'm going to use this zipper location and put them evenly from side to side at 6 feet. So there's 3 and there's 6. So we'll put a vent right here, and I'll just mark V for vent. And then we'll do the same thing over here and on the other side. So if on the other side this vent gets in the way of the door, I'll move it either to the left or the right by at least a foot, because I don't want it too close to the door, which is on the other side.
It's not uncommon to work inside your RV in the wintertime, so let's make a roll-up access to the heater vent so we can run the heater in the winter.
So I've already marked the location of the heater here, roughly, but I want to make sure that I go big because a cover sometimes doesn't fit always on the RV exactly the same every time. So I'm going to be several inches up here, and I'm using this seam line as my straight edge. There we go. And I'm going to mark basically how high I'm going to have that zipper come. Okay. So we're going to use this seam line up here, and I'm going to be a couple inches from the heater and strike a line, because this way I know the line is perpendicular to that seam line here, and then a line on this side a couple inches from the heater.
The process for installing this access door to the heater is done in exactly the same way that we did the zippered door panel, so you can refer back to that video for how to install the zippers and the vinyl patch. Here we're using an awl so we can locate where that vinyl patch will go at the top of the zipper. The only difference is that we'll be installing a hook and loop at the top of the zipper plaque that protects the zipper to keep the weather out, so we'll start at that point.
Our zipper is going to be installed in this, and this will roll up. This is going to be on, and it's going to be protecting the zipper. So it's going to be installed like this so that it covers this direction. On this side, it'll be installed so it covers this direction in towards the roll-up portion. So at the top, what I'm going to do is it's going to come up above this location to approximately there. To keep this closed, we're going to put on hook and loop. So I'm going to attach a piece of hook and loop right up here. This is the hook portion and some loop portion to this. But before we do that, we're going to cut the slit all the way to this point so that it's easier to sew the hook and loop in place. We're going to take this flange that protects the zipper, and we're going to lay it over the slit by approximately 3/8 of an inch. So here's approximately 3/8 of an inch. So there's our slit. And this will be where the Velcro will end. So I'm just going to take my soapstone and say, okay, the Velcro is going to end approximately there, because that's the edge of this. So here's our zipper flange, and I'm going to put my hook on top of it, and I'm going to cut it to pretty much exactly the same size as this flange as far as the width goes. Okay. Then I'm going to put double-sided tape on the back of this to hold it in place, and I'm going to baste it. See this edge where we had the vinyl patch? I'm going to baste it so about 3/8 inches over this middle slit that we made down here. So it's about 3/8 inches. It doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to go just a teeny bit above that vinyl patch area and put that on. Then we're going to do the same thing over here, and we'll show you what it's like when we're done here. So my hook is over here on this side as well, about 3/8 inch from the slit here, and a little bit above the vinyl patch on the underside, and it points in this direction just like this one does, so that the flap can be hooked to that. So we're going to put it on this piece. This is going to go on like this, and it's going to be folded over like that, so it goes on this side. This one I'm actually going to cut 3/8 inch shorter than that side, about like that, because I am going to have a seam here, and I don't want that excess bulk. So let's baste it there, and we'll do the same thing to the other flap. I'm going to reduce my stitch length to about 4 millimeters, and I'm going to put it all the way in zigzag. If you don't have zigzag, just use a straight stitch around the perimeter of the hook and loop, but this just makes it nice and quick. Do some reversing along this top edge. And this is a very quick way of installing hook and loop. There we go. We'll do that to the second zipper flap as well. Okay, because we have a slit, it's a little bit easier to get this underneath the throat of the sewing machine, as you can see. And we're going to do some zigzag stitching here, 2 rows. One row here and 1 row below.
A lot of content has been skipped because the process is, again, just like it was for installing the zipper for the door. We are going to start here because it's slightly different for where the zipper is basted and sewn, but again, we're going to skip ahead of anything that's a duplicate.
So that it's flush with this one. And if you have a long length of zipper, you'll want to use match-up marks to make sure you don't stretch one zipper more than the other, but this is short, so we don't have any problem with that. Baste it on like this. Now we can take it to the machine and sew it. Then I'm going to just do some reversing here. Okay, and we'll take this out and we're going to sew this one next. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, except for obviously we're sewing on the other side of the presser foot. So I'm going to move my needle this time to the right, okay, to get close to those teeth, and we'll do some reversing here. And sew down this side. This is going to be flipped like this, and we're going to do a top stitch. But that means that there's fabric here that's keeping it from making the turn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some good scissors, and that's why we reinforced it with vinyl, and cut it up a little bit so that I can make a slit that goes just a teeny bit past my sewing area that I just made. So right about there, okay? Now, the same thing is said of this. This is going to go over, and this is going to be top stitched right here. And that will require a slit on this side as well in that same area. So I'm going to slit it almost to that first stitch. I don't really want to cut through that stitch, though. If I do, it's okay. This is the side without the flange. We're going to take it and we're going to fold it like this. This is what the underside will look like by doing that. And we're going to lay this in the machine. And when we get to this point, I'm going to sew past the zipper a little bit, almost up to the Velcro, and then I'm going to do some reversing here. I'm going to do some pretty heavy reversing. That side is done. So that side's done. Now we've got to concentrate on this side. This side gets flipped over, and we want to make sure that the teeth are going the right direction, and that means that we're going to do a top stitch here, because you can see the teeth would be flipped so that they match these teeth. So I'm going to start here at the top and position this in the machine. So because this is sewing down well, that's why we did a lot of reversing there. I'm going to tuck this so that the zipper goes this direction, and I'm going to start my top stitch right where the zipper starts. So I'm going to put this in the presser foot, and my zipper starts where that mark was. And there's a lot of bulk back here, so let's make sure the feet are in the optimal position to get there. There we go. I'm going to lower my foot and I'm going to sew in this side, and I'm going to definitely do some reversing here. Notice the needles in the center position. A lot of reversing. Okay, now the zipper's going the right way. I'm going to sew very close to that fold. Really no reason to do reversing here. And there we are. So if you've done it right, you can see that we have a stitch here and we have a stitch here that is very close to that edge. We probably should have put that stitch a little bit closer to that fold, but as long as we've caught the zipper everywhere, which it looks like we have, yeah, we did, we're in good shape. So that is done. Now we need to do the same thing to the second one. So we have our slider. I'm going to open up this flap, which protects it from the sun and the elements, and we're going to put the fat end of the slider on at the top so it zips down. So we're going to run both ends into that slider and try to start them evenly like that, and it'll zip down and then it'll zip up, and we've already got one over here, and this would just roll up like this, and then we snap it with a strap, which we'll put on in a little bit here. So we've got a couple options. We don't want the slider to come off the top when it's rolled up, so you can either melt the teeth or you can put on a end stop. So if you're going to melt the teeth, you got to do this carefully because the teeth can catch fire, and you can also burn the fabric if you're not careful. So I'm going to touch the teeth on both sides until they basically become bonded together close to the top, like that. Oops, it needs a little bit more because I want this to be melted on this side too. So now I need to flip it up on the bottom. I'm going to put my hot knife over here so I don't accidentally get it to touch any fabric. And sometimes it's a good idea to put your finger in here and pop your teeth out a little bit like this so that you can melt the teeth without cutting threads or anything. So this is a cheap way to create a stop, and you don't have to have any special tools. There you go. So now that it's melted up here, this runs right into that and it'll stop every time. We're going to roll it up and we're going to put some webbing tabs on it. So we're going to roll it all the way to the top here. I'm going to position 2 tabs on at 4 inches from each zipper. So I'm just going to mark that location. A 10-inch webbing strip should definitely be long enough. We're probably going to have to cut it short. We're going to cut 2 of them to exactly 10 inches. I'm going to apply some basting tape, about 3/4 of an inch on 2 sides. This is where we're going to be sewing. This just to hold it in place till we take it to the sewing machine and sew. Then we'll peel off the transfer paper. We're going to flip this over so we can work from the underside. We know we're 4 inches from the zipper, so we're just going to put a mark where we're going to have it 4 inches on each side of the zipper. You can have more straps or less depending on the size, but we only need 2 here. So now this gets basted on so that it goes down like this. And the same thing with this one. So always have it go down towards your bottom of your door. Okay, we're just feeding this into the sewing machine. The underside is facing up. We're on top of that hem here, and I'm going to lower the foot, and I have it in zigzag. If you do this in straight stitch, just make sure that you do like 2 rows of a straight stitch, reversing several times. And I will sew right over top of that hem, doing quite a bit of reversing. It's not going to come under a lot of pressure, so that really is sufficient. Now we're going to move to the next one and do the same. We're going to load an eyelet in the press and snap tool, and then we're going to load a stud on the top die. We got to make sure that we get all this fabric in the throat of the press and snap tool, which should be possible without losing the die. Make sure that we go through the webbing, and I'm going to go right into that stitch that we created. So right there, that's a reinforced area, and we're going to depress the trigger, and that is installed in the webbing. Now we're going to load a button and a socket in the dies that I changed out for the press and snap tool. Okay, when we roll this up, you can also install snaps with other tools as well, but I love this tool. We want this to be fairly tight. It's actually not too bad the way it is. I'm going to fold this under like that, and I'm going to go through 2 layers. So that should be good. So we want the socket to be on this side where the fold is, and we want the button to be on the side that doesn't have the fold. Okay, so it'll snap up like that. Then you can unsnap it. And we're going to do the exact same thing over here. Unsnap it and close your opening. There we go.
We need to go back to the main entry door and install webbing straps so we can hold it up. Here's a look ahead at the rolled up zippered door. We need to install webbing tabs so that it can be stored rolled up at the top.
So just like we did for the vent, we have webbing that comes up here and will snap to here. And we secured the webbing on all the way up to the seam, so we have a little bit of reinforcement, and then we put the snap in the middle and then sewed it here. But to get this snap on, you obviously have to unzip this to the next location for the snap. So this strap goes underneath here like that. So I have my eyelet and my stud loaded in my press and snap, and I'll hold this webbing up and position it in the middle position. That's where I like to put it. Right through the webbing and through the fabric. So there's our snap installed. So to get to the next one, we'll do the same exact thing. So it's installed in exactly the same manner that we did with the vent. So in order to get this position, how I did this already for the door, is this very similar to the vent, is I took the adjacent panel and I zipped it to this. And then I marked the locations of where I wanted this webbing straps, and they're obviously too long, but I marked it with a pen or with my fabric marker here, and then I unzipped this, took it to the sewing machine and sewed the straps on. So now we have the socket and the button installed, and it does roll up tight here because the door is right underneath here. There we go. If you want to keep these flaps kind of down, if they stick out, you can put a snap here, and then you can unsnap it if you want, but we're not going to do that.
Next, we're going to create a hem along the bottom edge of the RV cover.
This is the front of the RV. This is where the propane is. And we marked around here. We need to remember to add 2 inches here for a double hem. Here is our 13-inch location, which is roughly measured, and here's our adjacent fabric. Obviously it's a little bit higher up, so I'm actually going to come up a little bit. This is all going to wrap underneath the RV anyway. I want this to be straight in line with this, so I'm going to use this as my straight edge, and I'm going to mark it here. And this is going to come down here, but don't forget the 2 inches we need to add there. Here we don't need to add any 2 inches. This is our 13-inch cut. This is the back of the top that goes across, and here's our 13-inch rough marks. So I'm going to put a straight edge from mark to mark and strike a line. Now before I move on, I want to go all the way to the corner and make sure, oh yeah, that looks like it's going to line up nice. So I'm going to use this line as a reference. Now look, see the fabric here? It stops here. So what we need to do is we need to move that up a little bit. Because remember, 13 inches is not exact science here. When we marked it, we were a little bit rough. So I'm going to match it up to this here. And then strike a new line. I moved my fabric around so that I could take advantage of my table. My 13 inches here, and there's my adjacent line, and I'm just going to match it up to that. You're just trying to make it look nice and pleasing. So we're going to cut our tail, and it's going to go right through the zipper as well, so that it follows the same plane, like that. And then this is going to have a double hem. Now since this is going to have a double hem, I'm not going to use a hot knife, and I'm just going to cut to that 13-inch line that we struck on this. This is the back side of the top. So now I'm marking 2 inches up from the cut edge that we have for our double hem, and I'm going to do this all across the length here so we can fold up to this line. Here's our zipper and our little flange for the zipper. And here I'm measuring 2 inches. How we deal with the zipper is going to be, we're going to cut out this bulk without disturbing this seam. To do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the teeth off up to that 2 inch, maybe one tooth past the 2 inch location. Okay, and don't worry about this raw edge or anything. This is going to be a double hem. Now we're going to put basting tape across here. So I'm putting double-sided tape close to that raw edge that we cut. This is an edge without a hot knife, but it's going to be folded under. Break it off, and then we'll peel off the transfer paper. This is the wrong side of the cover. You can see our seam allowance here, our zippers are here, so you don't want to do this from the top side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold to that line and baste the material down all along this bottom edge. This is the first of our double hem. Okay, now I'm putting double-sided tape on top of that first hem so we can create our double hem, and I'll do this all the way down the length. Okay, you notice this little tail sticks out. We can either just kind of touch this edge like this with a hot knife, since it's going to be sticking out, which will seal the edge of the fabric like that. And then we could just do our double hem and leave this like it is. It'll look like that, which isn't a big deal because it really wraps underneath the RV. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to peel off my transfer paper, and I'm going to create my double hem. Now, I don't have a line up here, but I just fold against the fabric here to create my second 1-inch hem. And I can pretty much feel it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is going to have webbing with a line underneath it to cinch it all up. So this is basically going to wrap slightly underneath the edge of the RV. And we're going to do this all the way to this other side. Now the nice thing about doing what we did here is we encase the teeth, or stop to the teeth. So this creates a beautiful stop for our slider. It won't go off of this edge when you zip it closed.
Okay, so we're going to sew this double hem in place, and I'm going to position the folded edge to the inside left of the center foot, and I'm going to put the needle in center position here. Now, when I get to the zipper's teeth, which are buried in here, I have to be careful. I'm going to do some reversing here at the beginning. So I'm going to walk this by hand because this is pretty thick, and I don't want the needle to deflect on a zipper's tooth. If it does, then I can control it a little bit better because I'm walking it by hand. Looks like we got over it pretty nicely, so we can continue to sew. Now there is a pretty big bump at the back, and I might have to pull on the fabric to get it to feed through here. Yeah, it's kind of the presser foot's a little bit stuck on it. So I'll lift the foot, pull on the fabric a little bit. Now I'm past it. So we're going to sew all the way to the other side, doing the same process. And when we get to the zipper there, we're going to be careful going over the teeth just like we did at the beginning. So I was rolling the balance wheel to make sure that I miss a tooth, and I struck a tooth with my needle, and I didn't break anything because I'm doing it by hand. So what do you do? Well, what I do is I back up the sewing machine slightly, and I lift my presser foot. There's a big bump here anyway, and I kind of pull my fabric a little bit, and then I'll lower my foot, and there, now my needle missed the tooth, and I can continue to walk through. So that's what you do if you hit a tooth, and you always want to do it with the balance wheel, a thick assembly like that. Here we are at the end. Remember, we have that fabric that rolls off the end a little bit. I'm just sewing through that. So I've zipped on the side panel onto this back panel where we've created our first double hem here. And this will obviously stop here because we've created kind of a natural stop. And I did that mainly so that I'd know how much fabric to cut off here, because I need to create a double hem here. There's our 13 inches, but these are rough measurements. This is actually 2 inches wide, which is perfect. So if I line it up to this bottom edge here, and I line it up to my lines, that means that this is going to be my cut, which is slightly different than our 13 inches, but hey, no big deal. I'd rather have this even than not even. Now that we know the location of this, we can take this panel off and reduce the bulk. Now, if you were too short, you could always sew in a piece here, but this is around 13 inches. We're a little bit off, but no big deal again. It's all gonna wrap underneath. So we're gonna trim it here. Now, we need 2 extra inches around that propane tank, so we're gonna add that. I flipped it so that the wrong side is up. So I'm gonna mark at 2 inches here. We were gonna do a double hem, but I think we're just gonna do a single hem here. There's not much stress here. Okay, when I create my single hem here at the corner, it's not going to want to take that corner. So I'm going to use a hot knife, and I'm going to go very close to the line that we struck, anywhere there's a slight curve. So like that. Now, when I fold, it'll take that nicely, and the cut edge will basically be to the inside. So I'm going to put double-sided tape on this and baste it in place. We're going to take this transfer paper off, and then we do have to cut the double-sided tape at each one of those junctures. We can fold it back and create our single hem. So I had to cut a few more slits to create this 2-inch, but I don't like this left raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Sailrite underneath it, and I'm going to make a flange for this because this doesn't unravel. And I'm going to do half at a time just to save on fabric. So I have enough material. My material actually goes clear over to here, so I have plenty here, and I'm going to stop there and do another portion of this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a scribe ball pencil, and I'm going to trace around this edge. So I'm going to cut here on the line that we struck, and then I'm going to go probably 2.5 inches out from this line to create a facing strip. Okay, this is 2.5. To make this slip, I'm going to put some McLube on it, and it'll slide so much easier. I need a rag now. 2.5. Wow, what a difference. Slides like butter. Now we can cut this out and we can mirror this. I'm going to try to be accurate because I'm not going to hem any of these edges. Now I can use my scrap, and I do want to make sure that I mirror it. So in other words, outside surfaces are facing each other for the other side. And look at that, I can use that beautifully. Okay, we've got double-sided tape on the shiny side of the Sailrite material. I'm going to peel it off and we're going to start basting it to this half and do the same thing with the other one. And that's off. And we're going to position this, and I'm going to position it so that it's just a little bit inside this folded edge. Like that, like a 1/8 of an inch or so. Then we'll just push it out. And because it's got the appropriate shape, it goes down nicely. And then we'll sew here and we'll sew here, and we'll do the same thing with this one. And a little bit of reversing at the beginning, and we're just going to go slowly around, trying to stay close to that vinyl strip and make sure that it stays basted down. And we'll do this to this edge and the outer edge. We're going to cut this off here. This has already been cut. Then we're going to come across here, cut this off, and then cut this bottom line. The top line we can't use because it has to be struck on the underside. And again, we're just trying to get close. So we have the slider moved up so I don't cut that off and have to reinstall it. And I'm going to cut through this flange. This is where the double hem is going to be created. And then follow our line. And we do the same thing over here.
Now we're not going to show any more of this because basically it's creating that double hem, cutting off a portion of the zipper so the bulk is taken away, and sewing it together. So we'll do that all the way around the perimeter. Here at this zipper, it needs a stopper. So we're going to put one on that since the fabric doesn't cover it. We'll show you that.
I like to put it on one tooth up from the last tooth. That way it kind of holds this on, and this just pushes on and then kind of goes a little bit crooked. It's not on all the way because it's not flush here. So push it a little bit crooked like this, and now it's on all the way because it's flush up here, and that creates a great stop. Now we're going to do this all the way down the length of this, and we'll show you what it's like when we're done.
We're going to sew webbing loops around the entire perimeter at the bottom edge of the cover. Here's a look ahead at the webbing loops that we'll install around the bottom edge. Through those, a leech line will be installed around the perimeter, the bottom edge perimeter of the RV, and then it can be tensioned at the front to draw in the bottom edge of the RV cover.
We're using a polyester 1-inch webbing, and we're cutting strips to 6 inches in length, and be sure to use a hot knife. That way it doesn't unravel. So we're going to cut several strips to 6 inches, and these are going to be for our loops for our line that's going to run underneath the cover. This is one of our side panels, and this is where the zipper zips up vertically. We're going to have a webbing tab about 6 inches from this on the forward or the top panel, and I'm going to put webbing tabs about every 3 foot. So at that zipper, I'm going to come over here and start my first piece of webbing here and mark it with the scribe ball pencil, and then mark about every 3 foot. Now you can change that if you want. You can put more on. I don't know if I'd put less on, but that's what we've chosen to do. So I'm going to mark it every 3 foot, and we'll show you what's next. This is our last webbing mark, and if I measure over 3 foot, that puts a webbing loop in the exhaust opening for our heater. And I don't want to put any webbing loops on openings like this because you can't roll it up, and it's the same thing with the door. So this one's fairly small. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start my next webbing piece here, which is probably about 4.5 feet. On the door, it's much wider. It's 45 inches. On the door, what I'll do is I'll put a webbing tab here and here because the span is so much larger. So right next to the zippers on large spans. For this one, I'm going to do it right here, which is about 4.5 feet from the last one. No big deal. So I've come to the end of the side panel here, and here's my last webbing piece. 3 foot is here. I'm going to put one there anyway. I am going to have one 6 inches past this, which means there'll be one like 2.5 feet or so. That's fine. Remember, the webbing loops are not typically too important of where they are, except for if they land on openings. Okay, there's the location for our webbing that we marked, and we're going to fold the webbing in half like so, and put it on this edge so that it's just a little bit off the top of that edge. You can sew 3 rows of a straight stitch, or you can do 2 rows of a zigzag in about a 4mm stitch length. I have it set for zigzag, and I'm going to do a lot of reversing here. So there's one, and then I'm just going to move it over here to the bottom edge and do another row. If you're doing straight stitching, just do a lot of reversing and do about 3 rows of a straight stitch. And that should do it. So we're going to secure every one of our webbing tabs on in that manner. This is the wrong side of the fabric facing up.
For great breathability, we're going to install vents in the RV cover next.
One of the advantages of the boat vent is it has a tear-shaped style, and that basically makes rainwater run around it, and the vent is at the bottom. It's easy to sew in, and it makes excellent ventilation for a cover like this RV. An important part of a good cover is ventilation. We'll be putting 2 of these boat vent covers on each side of the RV. You could put in more if you'd like. We already marked the location when we had the cover preliminarily on there, and I'm going to put it a few inches from the top. Once we get this one installed, we'll put them all the exact same. The best way to do it is to take chalk, even sidewalk chalk. This is chalk for upholstery applications, and mark the inner edge with the chalk, like so. And then what you can do is you can just flip this over at the location that you want it, making sure that it's nice and straight, and press down. I like to wiggle it just a little bit, and there's your outline. So now I'm going to put the tempered cutting glass underneath it because we want to cut this out with a hot knife, and this should give us a nice lip to sew through. There's no reason to reinforce this because of the fact that it's basically just a vent sewn into it. There's going to be no major stress on it, but you definitely should use a hot knife to cut the fabric to keep it from unraveling. There we go. So we are cutting our hole for the boat vent with the Edge hot knife. We have a corded version here, which works well and is obviously a little bit cheaper. And then we have the cordless version, which I love, but it does cost more money. So it heats up in a few seconds and cools down in less than a minute. And it's the same way with the electric one here. So I just typically like to start up here. This kind of helps to seal it too, because the double-sided tape kind of helps water from leaking through. But they don't really leak much anyway because they have a nice flange. So go ahead and wrinkle up the double-sided tape to get it to go around the perimeter. No problem. Revealing the double-sided tape. This is an acrylic tape. It doesn't yellow in the sun. I'm going to place it underneath my cover where I want it and position it, and then press the fabric to the double-sided tape. Now all we have to do is sew around it. We're going to set the machine up in straight stitch, maximum stitch length of 6 millimeters. When you're sewing around a circle like this, it can be difficult. But if you preload your fabric with kind of like what a spring would look like, it's easier. So let me show you. So first, let's get the fabric underneath the presser foot. Okay, and we're going to start sewing here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist my fabric around, and you can see it kind of forms like what a spring would look like. Now that you have to have everything basted well, so make sure that you don't twist it around to the point where everything starts coming unbasted. And I'm going to start right here. So my fabric is pre-twisted. Now I'm going to lower my foot, and I have my needle all the way to the left here so that I can get closer to that edge. And I'm not going to do any reversing at the beginning. I'll do some reversing at the end over top of these previous stitches. Everything's still basted in place. and watch what happens now. So this presser foot's going to be up against the boat vent. And see how easy this is because the fabric is basically pre-turned. Now when I get up this peak, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury my needle for one more stitch right there, and then I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to rotate on the buried needle to kind of turn my boat vent around, lower my foot, and then sew down this side. And when I get to my previous stitches, I'm going to sew over them a little bit. And then I'm going to do some reversing. And that is all there is to it. Let's take a look to see what it looks like. Yes, that looks good. Look at that. I got a nice stitch all the way around the perimeter, and on the underside it looks good. The stitch is nicely in the flange.
Anywhere the fabric is prone to possible damage from sharp objects should have a chafe-resistant patch. We'll only be showing installing one.
The seam here is the center of our top, but this is where the antenna is. It's slightly off center, and this is the end of the antenna. So I want to cover about an 18-inch swath of that with a reinforcement chafe patch, and I've cut an 18-inch strip of Sailrite. So I've gone a few inches past the end of the antenna, and we have it right here, not centered because the antenna is not centered. And I need to find this so that I can sew it on the underside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up this corner, and with my finger right there at that corner, I can tell where this is, and I'm going to just put a big dot there. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Lift this up and put a dot on the underside. So I have my strip. I had to sew a section on with a semi-flat felled seam, which you already know how to do now. And I'm going to put basting tape around the entire perimeter so that I can baste it in place so it doesn't move. All right, we're peeling the double-sided tape off. This Sailrite vinyl is almost like a truck tarp material, so it's really good for abrasion areas. And we want this cover to last for years. So anywhere that I feel like there's something that might abrade through the fabric, I'm going to put this down to protect it. So here are my two dots, and I'm going to line it up to those dots and baste this down and get it as flat as possible. Since I have a seam, I can use that to make sure that it's not centered, because that seam's not centered, but it's straight. So that looks like it's straight compared to the seam on the other side. You could take measurements if you'd like. Now we're going to make sure that we have no air bubbles in this by basting it from this side down. So I'm going to sew a straight stitch around the perimeter, and I have the bulk of the material underneath the throat of the sewing machine. And we'll just do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning, and we'll sew around. Now if you sew through your double-sided tape, then that kind of is a water barrier, because the double-sided tape expands in the heat of the sun, and it helps to seal the needle holes.
We're going to make belly straps out of shock cord. That's next.
This is a 1/4 inch shock cord, and we're going to use it for the belly line, and I'm going to use a hot knife. Now you are cutting through an outer core, and then you're cutting into rubber bands, so it is going to smell and stink a little bit, but I like a nice finished edge like that. So I'm going to measure this, and my distance width underneath the RV is around 90 inches. I'm going to cut it to 9 foot when it's slack. I'm not going to have any stretch to it, which is a little bit wider than our RV. Okay, so now I've got my shock cord. Yet next is I'm going to use a hog ring, and I'm going to secure it in my hog ring pliers, and I'm going to create an eye, and this eye will be used to run the line through it. And I'm going to just put both ends of the shock cord in, and then I'll crimp.
like so. And that forms a nice eye, okay? Then on the other end, what we're going to do is we're going to use the shock cord hook with cleat. Okay, these are pretty cool. So what you do is you feed it in here, and this is an adjustable, a way to adjust your shock cord. The bottom has a hole here. That's where it goes, into that hole. Comes out the side like this. And then to tension it, all you have to do is do this. And it is nice and secure. And then we can just hook this to the line on the other side. So we're going to make 5 of these.
And finally, now we get to install our RV cover. Here we're using 2 A-frame ladders, and we have a person on the right and a person on the left side, and we are unrolling the top portion of our cover first over the top of the RV and down its forward edge and rear edge. Then we'll grab the side panels and we will zip them horizontally across the top first. Remember, there are 2 zippers here. And then we'll zip them down along the vertical zipper, and we'll do the same to the opposite side. And our cover is installed. Now we need to cinch it up a little bit.
So I positioned my shock cord where I want it. I made 4 of them, not 5. You can make as many as you want. And I have the line, leech line, that runs into each one of these straps, already strapped on the other side. So all I have to do to secure this is find the end right here and go through each one of these webbing tabs that we sewed on, and at each location where we want one of these, we just run it through the eye and then through the tab. It's not attached to the webbing. Here I'm going to go through here, and then I'm going to go through this eye of the shock cord and then through here. And here's our next one. We're going to go through the eye. That's why we made these tabs a little low. It's easy to feed this all on. And then here's our last one. Go through this eye. And then we'll go to the front and show you what's done there. Okay, we're going to go through this last webbing strap here, and then I'm going to use this micro marine ratchet, and there's a little locking lever, so I'm going to lift up on the locking lever and feed the 1/8 inch leech line through it, and this will allow us to draw it up nice and snug. So we're going to go to the other side and we'll show you what we do there. So this is the line on the other side, and all I'm going to do is just create a trucker's hitch. It's pretty easy. You just tie it around itself like that. Nothing fancy about that. So we have an eye now, and I'm going to go underneath. So I'm just going to put the hook into this, and then we'll start to draw this taut. And then once it gets semi-taut, we can go around the RV and check to see what it looks like, but I'm pretty sure it's right where I want it. Nice thing about this is that you just keep doing this until you get it nice and firm like that. And then we could cut this line if we want. I like to leave it long. I'll probably tie it up here. So now we have the shock cord belly straps, and I'm going to throw this to the other side, and we'll do that with all of them. So now we'll take the hook and we'll hook it to our line, and we can just pull on this, drawing it nice and tight. I'll probably climb under here a little bit so that I can get my angle right. The nice thing about this is it's shock cord, so it wants to tension it up. There we go. What we did is we put a webbing tab here. You can't see it because the line actually runs through it. Here, you can see it like that. Right at this corner, probably for about 6 inches or so from this corner. And then there's one here as well, right here. Oh, hold on. Then there's one here, right here, and that one's probably about 8 inches from the corner. And we did not put any in the corner, and that actually worked pretty well. It made the fabric hug this corner when the leech line was tightened. So that's what we recommend to do at the corners. Then we put a webbing tab about every 3 foot randomly. And you could put more if you'd like. Like here's one here, and this fabric's a little bit loose. If you put another one there, it would be a little bit tighter. But we do believe it holds pretty well. We did not put any webbing tabs on this door, mainly so that we could open the door up easily. And the door opens like this. Since it's zippered and it has flaps to protect the zippers from the sun. All the way up. And then we roll this up. And then we have access to the door. Then we could put a snap up here if you'd like. That would keep that closed. We opted not to.
Coming up next is the materials and tools list. These are the materials that we used. The quantities shown in yellow are the amounts of materials that we ordered for our RV cover. If you have any questions about the materials or the fabric we used, be sure to give us a call or email us. We're glad to help. For the tools, obviously no quantities are given since we typically just use one of each. This RV cover is made from top-notch 9 fabric, which is extremely UV resistant and abrasion resistant. It should last for years. If you enjoyed this video, click the link in the description below or at the icon at the top right to check out other projects in the Airstream Argosy renovation series. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.